what is your philosophy of education?
Well, basically, I think education must try to meet the individual needs of the individual. To prepare him or her for life, not only morally and academically, and economically and skill-wise as well. It's preparation, really, for life. However, you never really finish with your education. So that while you might complete your formal education, in terms of high school or college or graduate school or whatever, you're always learning. You're always getting smarter. You're always accumulating more knowledge. Your education really never stops. But initially, insofar as it concerned you, I would say it was preparation. Preparation for life.
Okay. What role do you think the student should play in this building, and what role do you think the teacher should play? And what, if anything, is preventing them from playing this ideal role? So we're talking about the ideal situation.
Yeah, well, of course, I have a more or less of a conventional old-time school philosophy about these things. I think that the teachers and the students in North High School are playing the roles basically as they should be playing. And I don't think that anything is preventing them from playing them as they should be playing. Basically, I'm quite satisfied with the roles as they stand now. I think that the students have gotten a little bit more responsibility, such as the various committees and forums that are being held and have been held and are being planned. Small things, yet significant, such as making the announcements on the public address system in the morning. But basically, I'm for the traditional approach. And I think that's being maintained pretty well here, and I don't think there's anything preventing.
What as a teacher frustrates you most here, if there's anything? You can pinpoint one thing.
Well, this may surprise you in some ways. As a teacher, I have very, very few frustrations. As a coach, there are many other things that come into play. Many other factors in coaching. Because that's a competitive situation. You're dealing not only with the students in the school, but competing against teams on the outside, other schools, and that brings up all sorts of different problems. The facility problem, for instance, as far as basketball is concerned. We're conducting this interview approximately 3:15. In the afternoon, school has been out 45 minutes, 40 minutes, and we don't start practice for another hour and 15 minutes. These are some of the things that we have to contend. But basically, I have few, if any, frustrations as a teacher at North High School. I would say this, that one of the things that I don't quite understand, I think maybe there is one frustration, it's with kids who don't realize just how fortunate they are, in my opinion. You know, there are some kids who have some economic and personal difficulties naturally. But basically, I think this student body is a pretty well-off, you might say, student body. And there are times where I don't believe that they realize how well-off they are.
The ideal educational system is one in which everybody will benefit from, including the student, the teacher, and those in the community. Now, assuming that we haven't yet laid the foundation, now you can just dispute this, because this is the way I pose the question to everybody else. Assuming we haven't laid the foundation, what foundation would you begin with in order to reach this goal of an ideal educational system? If you feel you've answered it, then go right up to there.
Well, I think that more involvement of the parents in the school, and more understanding on the part of the parents in the schools in general on this island, and I say this as both a teacher and a parent, is necessary. I think here at Northern High School, as I taught before, as I said before, students are assuming more responsibility. They're planning discussions and forums and one thing or another, and I think that's fine. But it's the parents who actually pay the freight. They're the ones that pass these budgets and support these schools. And as a result, I think they ought to become more involved and know more of what's going on. Now, the mechanics of that, I don't know. I don't know how I would go about that. I'm not much of an expert on PTAs. But I always try in coaching, for instance, to get to know as many, if not all, of the parents on my squad personally, boys on my squad personally, and try to get them to understand exactly what I'm doing so far as basketball is concerned. And perhaps if we all did a little bit more of that kind of thing, we might lay a better, firmer foundation toward the ideal situation.
Okay. Do you believe that students in the school come to school with a genuine interest in learning? And if not, what can be done?
I believe that the majority of these kids in this school are so college-oriented. There's so much pressure put on these kids by parents, by themselves, and perhaps by we people with the school, that they come to school marks-oriented and most interested in what grades they're going to get in the academic areas and less interested in what they're going to learn, but I'm not sure it's all their fault. I think it may be just the fantastic pressure that's on kids today getting into school because everybody wants to go to school today. And the colleges are crowded, and it's much more competitive than it was, for instance, when I was applying to school 4 years ago, in 1942. Well, I think the kids have a genuine interest in learning, definitely, but I think they're more interested because of circumstances in the grades rather than what they learn. Definitely.
Oh, we can skip 7 because that wouldn't apply to you. The 3 things that are most important to you as a teacher are. I can stop.
It's more important than anything else, and that's the kids. And seeing these young men, because I have some of the girls that drive education as well, but basically I Phys and working coaching. See these young men develop from the time they're in the 7th grade until the time they go through and on into college or whatever type of endeavor they go on to. That to me is the most important thing. I don't think there's anything else in education, anything else that I do that can possibly give me the satisfaction that I get, for instance, at holiday times when the basketball players who play for us here come back and see us and scrimmage against us and socialize with us and carry on in that fashion. To me, that is the most important thing, and there isn't anything that comes close to it. I like to win ball games. I think that's important. I like to see the classes be well organized and the school be well organized, and that's all important. But basically, the most important thing is the young men that I work with, how they are when I see them after they finish. That's the most important thing.
Now, the final question is, if you could get across one message to everybody, including the student, the teacher, and the parent, just about education, what would that one message be?
Well, basically, I would have to say that they want to jump into it with both hands and both feet because you only go to school once. And what I said before, your education continues on. You still only go to school, high school, for once. And you get out of it what you put into it. And barring ill health or accidents or some unforeseen misfortune, anyone that wants to learn, anyone that tries his or her best, can be successful in something in this country today with the proper education. And I think if I have one thing I want to get across, that's what I would say.
Okay. Fine. Okay. What is your philosophy of education? That's question 1.
No, that in itself is a very hard question. I say, what's my philosophy of education? You want to be more specific on that? Can you?
No, I can't. Let's just leave it at that. If you don't think you can, because the rest of the questions I have here will generally lead up to that kind of question. I just throw that out.
Then can we come back to that question? Maybe we can come back to it. Perhaps I'll answer it as we go along with the question.
Okay, the next question is more specific. What do you think the role of the student should be part B to that, what do you think the role of the teacher should be? And what, if anything, is preventing this ideal role you're going to describe now?
Well, let's go to the first thing. I think that in education now, I think that everyone should have a role. Not only students, teachers, administrators, parents. I think everyone should have this role in determining what is the best education and how can we give the best education to the youth of America. The role of the students specifically, I think sometimes they could take part, active part, and even the selection of teachers, the curriculum. Every phase of their life in school, they should have a part and say. How it's going to be done, I don't know. The mechanics involved, I don't know. But I'd like to see the students take an active part. Sometimes, however, I think that taking an active part means to some students that what they say, or to the student body, that what they say we should follow. That isn't necessarily true. If you say, look, we should have this, such as a student lounge, and the administration or the teachers and everyone else says, well, I don't know if that's going to be a good idea, maybe it can't work out. Well, we may turn you down on that. You still have an active part. Doesn't mean that we follow through exactly what you said, or some of the premises that you endorse. Okay? Same way as with teachers now. Teachers feel that they want an active part. And we have been more active in every phase of education, more phases of education. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, not so. Now, yes. And here again, teachers also must recognize that they can't also dictate, if we want this, we're going to get it. They've got to work it out in the whole total program with everyone else involvement and finally coming to a conclusion. Here's how it should work.
Well, okay, let's try this question here. What frustrates you?
Did we answer that third part, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it is. What frustrates you as a teacher most? Let's try as a guidance counselor most.
A lot of things. But I think our biggest frustration as a counselor at North High, and I think this probably goes with all counselors on Long Island, pretty much in community, that we don't have enough time in the day to do the kind of work we feel is important. Some of the work that I do in this office could be more easily done, and perhaps even better done, by a secretary. I'd rather spend more of my time working and helping the kids out with their problems, spending more time talking to kids so that they will feel comfortable and talking to me about their problems. It takes time for a kid to warm up, to be able to say, I can trust Mr. Miele, and therefore I can talk to him. If I bring him in the office and spend 10 minutes with him, and pretty much the dialogue is my telling him and advising him what to do, how can he trust me? How can he even begin to know me? How can I get to know him? We don't have the time to communicate. By virtue of number and economics, it seems to be something that we'll perhaps not never achieve, but it's a long way off, where we can work with 100 kids rather than 300. And therefore, 1/3, let's say 2/3 less total load, and we can really work with each kid. And it seems today that more kids, however, are coming down, recognizing that they have problems, that they need someone to talk to, and the guidance counselors, there's someone that they can talk to. And therefore, we are working harder, longer. And many times, things that people don't see. They say, guidance counselor, he drinks coffee all day long. He's in his office, no one knows what he's doing, how he's doing it, and a lot of other things. But, like talking to Tommy just now, 45 minutes. Tommy's not even my counselor, but he was my football player, and I'm trying to help him out, talking to him, see what I can do to help him. This is the kind of work that I need to do that will help kids. And this is what will break down what we call the gap, Tommy gets to know me better. I coached him for 3 months, right? He probably knows a lot more of me now in the one session we just had than he knew in 3 months on the football field.
The ideal educational system is one in which everybody will benefit from, including the student, teacher, and those in the community.
Assuming you haven't yet laid the foundation, what foundation would you like to lay to lead us to this ideal educational system?
The questions are tough. The questions are tough. The ideal educational system. One of the things I think that is very important, extremely important, is to be able to I'm looking for a word, screen teachers better. We need a better teachers, more of the better kind of teachers. Because with better teachers, they will minimize some of the problems that are created by teachers who are difficult in class and school. This is a real plus in getting to the ideal situation in the educational process. You need to have teachers who are more interested in kids in a positive way and dealing with education and the total school problems and the total kid problem. You know, many teachers may say, you know, that's not my problem, that's not my province. But it really is. The whole kid is a problem. And teachers who are more concerned with kids will help. And teachers who are more interested in their job as a profession will lend for better work in school, much better work in school. I think you can see that yourself as even the youngsters are going through the schools now. The teachers that you felt that you've gone through and had as teachers, those that you felt really were interested in you as a person, as a student, and as a person, had less difficulty. I don't know if you ever examined it that way, but if you look back, you might find it to be pretty true. It doesn't always work out always, but it really is something that if you examine closely, you'll find it to be true. Those who enjoy their work, enjoy the students, have less difficulty, and can yield and lend to this, what you call an ideal educational system. That's the one thing. If there's any one thing we can do, that's the one thing I think we need to do. Then, of course, you can go into curriculum and go into other facets of the educational process. You know, such as some of the things we talked about: curriculum, student involvement, parent involvement, and industry involvement, which we even talked about. We should know more about what's going on in industry and how we can change our educational system from time to time, so that we get more in tune with what's going on in industry.
Here's a question we have, Great Steele. Do you believe there should be a tracking system?
Yes, I do. In certain areas, yes. In other areas, no. And here again, you need a master teacher to be able to work in the realm of an untracking system in certain areas. You need a master teacher. You need good teachers. I think in many cases the tracking system, especially for those who are on the bottom of the scale, are looked down upon. Here again, it's our society that really looks down upon. And we, the people that make up the society, look down on a kid who's not going to go to college. Oh, you're not going to college? Oh, you're going to be a mechanic? Oh, you know, okay. It's not important. You know, in our society, we don't weight that, the value of that very much. Oh, you're going to be a doctor. Oh, you're going to be a lawyer. That's important. And I think that the kids in our school, in all schools, who are on the lower end of that scale, never felt like they were part of the school system. And invariably, they were the ones that became troublemakers in the school and created problems in the school. I think you're aware of the BOCES program, right? They kind of supplement our education. And they give these kids more meaning to their education now. And therefore, hopefully in future years, when this will become solidified and to a point where kids say, hey, I'm getting one heck of a program at BOCES, I'm going to become one heck of a STEAM fitter. And society thinks that STEAM fitters are important, then they're going to feel important. But if no one feels them important, how can I feel important? Unless you're a real strong person inside. Unless you got a tremendous ego which was established by your parents. Then and only then can you say, look, I feel good becoming a garbage man. I want to be a good garbage man. I want to be happy being a garbage man. Our society doesn't lend to that right now.
You don't think the tracking system contributes somewhat to that kind of feeling?
It doesn't have to. It might, but it doesn't have to. You know, only because we say the people on the bottom scale are no good, in the sense that they're not like the better ones who are the cream of society's crop. It's like, you know, even our government says, look, you guys that are not going to college, you have to go in the army, but the guys who go to college will defer you. What the hell is that saying? It's saying, once again, kid, your mother said you were no good because you never did achieve well in school. Your teacher said you're no good because you never achieved well in school, and the teacher says if you don't do well, you're not a good student. Oh, he's right now. They're okay. Everywhere along the line, people are knocking you because you're not doing well. So, and now even the federal government saying, look, since you didn't achieve, you're going in the army and tough to get killed, which I was against. I was against that. I think we're now equalizing these things more and more. Everything is going on a more equal plane. I think in time, too, we'll get back to where the craftsman is going to be recognized and appreciated, where he's not as much now, although we pay for it. You know, a good plumber's worth his weight in gold, right? A good electrician, you pay right through the nose. You pay good money for him, but you still don't recognize him as an important part of our society. He's an electrician, so what? But now if you talk about the engineers and the politicians, oceanographers, all these people, big titles and big jobs, and recognized because of their educational background, now that's the guy that we epitomize and we put on a pedestal.
Do you believe that students come to school with a genuine interest in learning?
With a what?
A genuine interest in learning.
Initially they do. No, like a 6-year, when I have 3 children, so every one of my kids really interested in going to school. Yeah, I want to go to school. I think sometimes as the kids go through school, that's knocked out of it. And that's, I think, the fault, could be the fault of our educational process. And it could be the fault of the teacher. You know how many kids in elementary grades, a good clue to this is how many kids in elementary grades still love school, and how many don't. And if you take any kind of a study, you will find that the teacher that makes school interesting, the kids love school. The teacher that doesn't make it interesting, kids begin to dislike it. And all of a sudden, you know, it's hard to get them to like it again. And as the work becomes more troublesome, more boring to them because of the way it's being handled, they get to dislike it. By the time they get to high school, it could be a very difficult thing. One thing that makes it good, though, is that kids who are able to foresee say, well, if I do get a good education, I'll have a good job and make a lot of money, will be well respected. So they look to that. Some kids can't see that, so they don't care about school. So if like running achievers, you can achieve well but don't care. But then we're getting into psychological problems, which I don't want to deal with, right now. So if I answer that question, I'd say initially kids, sure, they do come to school with a genuine interest in school. I think they lose it by virtue of, once again, getting back to what I said originally. They lose it because teachers are not keeping the interest there, not teaching the way where the kids love it. It's like a coach. I coach in football. I could make a drudgery. Football could be just as, kids can say, hey, practice again, who cares? But if I make practice interesting, they look forward to go to practice. And then they'll become better athletes on Saturday when they play. But if I make practice the same old thing from year on, year after year, week after week, month after month, day after day. If it becomes the same old thing, same old grind, they don't take to it with enthusiasm. You know, and this is something that most kids go into, they want, you know, they need, they love it. But I can knock it right out of them by virtue of how I plan the program. See? And it's the same thing as in teaching, you know. How many times I think you yourself, you say, hey, boy, this teacher is really interesting. I'd love to go to that class. You know, you're getting back to individual classes and individual teachers. Aren't you really?
Yep. 3 things that are most important to you as guidance counselor.
3 things that are most important to me. In my job, or in my family, or in my job. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, I can't really think of an answer now. Dr. Thought it might come to me. First thing that's important is that I do a good job with the kids. I know I'm influential to them, I can help them out, and that's important, that I work well with them. And I give them the feeling that they could come down and see me and work with me, you know, and talk to me about their problems and some of the things that they feel kind of unhappy about. That's important. Other thing is that are important, you said, right? I wish I had more time to do a more thorough job with the kids that I'm working with. It means to cut back on the number of kids I work with. A more thorough job I'd like to be able to do. And what's important, I think I would hope that we would have the kind of a school that would be kind of a healthy atmosphere where people can share experiences and feelings. And the kind of a school where, you know, we can help each other, rely on each other, trust each other, so that kids will have this freedom of being able to express themselves. Do you have that now? Partially. I think we have an element of it. I think some kids might be repressed. I'm not so sure the school did this and the repression. I think that some teachers have, by virtue of their own personality, repressed kids. I think some teachers, by virtue of their personality, have a tendency to want to open up kids. However, kids are repressed by virtue of their parent upbringing and other facets and other areas, other reasons, and they sometimes won't trust someone who they could trust. And it takes a long while before they get the trust them, and this is the time I'm looking for. You know, teachers might need the time in order to warm up that person to where he can trust them.
Last question I have is, if you could get across one message to everyone who's interested in education, and I don't mean people that are going to become teachers, I mean people that are interested in what's happening in the school, people that work in the school, you know, what might that one message be?
You mean all of society? Well, I've always said that our country, I've always thought that our country was built on not the raw material in the sense of, you know, like iron ore and wheat and things like this. We really built this country to a great country, and the raw material has been people. I hope soon we get the values back where they belong. Unfortunately, we get back to economics. Who wants to get into teaching? We know we need better teachers. We know we need the better minds in teaching, but who wants to get into it? Not very many people. It's a tough job, an unrewarding job sometimes, except for the dedicated. By dedication, I'm talking about those people.
What is your philosophy of education? Hard question.
Well, I think that my
educational philosophy cannot be really separated from the social structure in which the education itself is transpiring. I think that education is a part of the whole social structure of the ideology of the society, and any problems of the society will be reflected in the school itself. The school will be a microcosm of the larger society. And from there it follows that one's educational philosophy would either be geared toward a social reforming conceptualization or a conservative status quo orientation of education. Education would either be either have a progressive element in it, geared toward the set of reforming ideas. This would be the underlying philosophic base, or it would consider itself as a transmitter of the cultural heritage in a more or less conservative tradition. But in either case, the philosophic base of the thing is social, rather than education having some inherent value in itself.
Do you think social, you see it from a different point of view because of your position as a teacher, like you're a sociologist? See it from different
No, because I think through my training, through my own experiences in life and my training, I very early absorbed the idea that schools were vital to what we used to call back in the old days the democratic citizenship concept, and like Thomas Jefferson, a free citizenry is made possible only through a public education. And what started with me as a kind of a political concept of education, as education for citizenship and all of the responsibilities, preparing for the responsibilities of citizenship, over a period of time broadened out and widened into the larger, what we would call sociological concepts, that the school would be concerned with classes and groups, competing groups within society, and all the various racial dimensions and all the various problems and issues that one associates with a larger society. So it would be, I think, in my own case, a normal extension of the political citizenship concept into the whole area of social issue itself.
Okay, good. What role do you think you should play as a teacher? What's your point?
As much as possible to clarify the issues in such a way that the youngsters themselves can relate to these issues without trying to overpower them with the precise answers. That particularly in say the teaching of history, one comes to grips with human problems and concrete issues. History is fraught with this, as well as all the other social studies. And I would feel that if I could clarify the issues in such a way that the youngsters themselves could find the right sources of evidence and through their own lifestyles and their own life experiences relate themselves to these issues, I would consider my job to have been successful.
What do you think the student's role should be? Applying yours, their role.
Well, I would hope that the student would feel that he has an activist role to play, that his role is to respond to these issues as best he sees them and mature. His own personal maturation, in my opinion, is predicated on the idea that the more he can relate to the larger social issues around him, the more of a mature human being he himself will be. So I think almost by definition, the more successful he is in actively relating himself to these issues in the classroom, the chances of his own maturation becoming healthy are thereby increased.
Mm-hmm. Next question I have, is there anything preventing you and or students from fulfilling this responsibility you just outlined? If so, what?
Of course. there's a great tension between the concept of a public school as democratically controlled and a public school as free. Try as we might, and I've tried long and hard on this, you can't develop the concept of academic freedom. And by academic freedom, I mean academic freedom of both teacher and student. And in exactly the same way in the high schools and in the elementary schools as you can in the colleges. And the main reason, of course, that you can't do that is because you really are operating within the strictures of community thinking, parental and community, and the social thinking that goes on in the particular social environment in which that school is located. Try as you might, you still are accountable to parents as far as their own children are concerned. Now this means that the more one gets away from this environment in an educational atmosphere, college that is, the more logically that college and that student is free to pursue these issues.
What type of evaluation system do you use to evaluate students?
In the pure sense of the word test, I would like to feel that my tests are really conceptual in nature rather than factual in nature. I would like to feel that if a youngster were to score well in the precise test sense, his scoring would have been accomplished in the area of mastery of key concepts which have to do with a particular issue or unit that one is studying. But in the larger sense, I think one evaluates youngsters along more informal lines, how well he addresses himself to issues in a class, how well he expresses himself, both orally and in written expression, how well he seems to be growing himself in a personal sense and relating himself to these issues that I talked about before, how skillful he is in applying his own insights to these.
The next question I had was, what type of evaluation system would you prefer to use?
I would like to develop some criteria, some personal criteria, rather than objective measurements, where one looks at the youngster in terms of perhaps some of these skill areas, how well he does this, how well he does that, in terms of everyday performance, what is actually going on in the classroom. And although this cannot be conceptualized in the perfectly objective terms, I'm not asking for a kind of a scientific objectivity here. I think more what one would philosophically have to say that this kind of teaching and relationship to a pupil would be more of an art than it would a science, and more subjective. But you're really looking at the student in his day-to-day performance. And the evaluation really is predicated on a kind of a day-to-day performance.
You would like to see more individuality, though, in terms of evaluation?
But
the student as an individual.
One has to be a little careful about that, though. I think one can lean in this direction and still subscribe to a more or less common denominator of what should be expected of a youngster in terms of performance in a classroom. I think one can, at least as an individual teacher, perhaps this cannot be done in an entire school structure. I think the individual teacher can establish in his mind what he feels at least to be a fairly objective criteria, which he would consider to be a common measuring stick he could use in the classroom against all pupils.
Do you feel students come to school with a genuine interest in learning?
Yes and no. In terms of the kind of philosophy that I've been talking about, I would consider that in those particular home environments where social issues are discussed and interest is kindled in the home environment, that the motivation of the youngster could be ensured in the ways that I've described earlier. To the extent that this is not done in the home, the youngsters come to school poorly prepared. I think it's practically hopeless to say that any youngster at all will come to school with some inherent sense of, some inherent, almost biological motivation toward education in general. I think that's silly. But I think, on the other hand, one could say that youngsters can be nurtured in the home environment to be motivated to take an interest in the social issues.
Not to change the subject, you feel that it should be practiced.
I would take a middle ground on this, on tracking. I think it's almost criminal, really, that non-Regents youngsters are tracked off to one side, because it means, to me at least, that all the various cultural experiences that the more fortunate youngsters have been able to have had, that they take in the classroom, are denied these non-Regents youngsters. I want to define the non-Regents youngsters. I see them. I do not look upon the non-Regents youngsters as necessarily intellectually inferior. I regard them really as culturally deprived. And without these cultural experiences, it's criminal for a youngster to wallow in a classroom with other youngsters with the same limited background. There just is no way in which these shared experiences can be had. On the other hand, I do appreciate the fact that their lack of skills, the lack of reading, their inability to read and write as well as other youngsters, might handicap them in more power-charged, if you will, intellectual type of environments. And they really would flounder. But there's no reason in my mind at all that a non-Regents youngster, for example, cannot learn through the transmission of ideas in, say, what we call the average classes. Now, on the other hand, I also think that one could make a case for separating extremely gifted youngsters, if for no other reason. I have found through experience they can be psychologically bored, really, by the pace of some of the classes. Yeah. And I think it does make some sense to challenge these kinds of youngsters with more stimulating and challenging material. Right here?
Yeah.
So, I'll get it.
What frustrates you as a teacher most about the
What's that?
What frustrates you most as a teacher about the educational system? You pinpoint
it. Routine, I guess. Bureaucracy. All the various 1001, the routinized chores the teacher undertakes in the name of professionalization.
The ideal educational system is one that every person, including the student, the teacher, and the community, would benefit from. What aspect of education would you change or add to it in order to reach that goal of perfect ideal educational system? What kind of foundation would you have to set?
The three components are what again? The school, the pupil, and the community?
Student, teacher, and the community.
The student, the teacher, and the community. We've got to find some way in which teachers can regain the old-fashioned community conceptualization themselves. Unfortunately, teachers do not have this. They come from the city, they come from all kinds of distances, and teachers psychologically do not relate to this old-fashioned concept of community. How that can be changed, I have no way of knowing. I can, point it out only as a difficulty. I think, on the other hand, we have a tremendously important operation we haven't even thought about in the public schools, and that is somehow or other integrating and finding some healing powers within the community at the adult level. This means some sort of a public school sponsored set of workshops, or even perhaps formal courses of adults in human relations, racial relations, all kinds of sociological kinds of insights that they need really to regain the sense of community responsibility and the ethical sense which really pulls groups of people in physical areas together into something we call a community. And I really have always thought that this is the essential. the essential and logical role of the public school. There's no other agency in the community out there that can really do this. The school is the only logical agency that I can see in which this can even be tried. And just to fortify this even a little more strongly, I just don't see how any school can really succeed if it rests on a community base, unless that community has some integrative sense, unless that community has some reasonable psychological sense of organic unity, the parents themselves.
You could put it in terms of 3 orders of priority. My next question is, what 3 things are most important to you? Number one, the other interviews I had was an attitude change. Stood out most. You could put it in order.
Yeah, I would put that right at the very top too. I would say that if we could assume a revolution in attitude on the part of parents and youngsters, but that is a kind of an educational outcome rather than a condition. But it would be awfully nice if it were a condition that one could operate from to start off with. That would be, I guess I would put that right at the very top. And then 2, I would like to work in a kind of a school where administrators and teachers and pupils feel that they are part of a organic community, and it can be a kind of a democratic interaction among all of these components, rather than the sense of hierarchy, rather than the sense of top-down. That all 3 elements are involved in a common enterprise. And rather than go through the silliness that we're going through today, that this is your piece and this is your piece, and kids, this is your piece too, belatedly, instead of having this kind of jurisdictional type of squabbling, if we could have some sort of a philosophical premise that all 3 have a mutual interest in the same operation. And it's in the self-interest of all 3 to operate. I guess I would call that my number 2 priority. And then I guess the 3rd priority is the more mundane area of material itself, that to be able to have the richness of materials, instructional materials, which would make a really meaningful and a dramatic type of educational experience each day in the first grade. What we call sometimes the self-contained classroom, with all of the hardware and all of the software and all of the books and all of the mountains of materials that the modern technology makes possible. Okay?
The last question is, including this interview, if you could get across one idea to those interested in education, one message to everybody, what might that be?
You want this in depth, or you just want as just an idea?
Any way you want it. Okay.
To regain what we think we once had in history of looking upon the public school as a vital organic element, in the development of the and health of the general society itself, and to realize that the free society and the public school are indistinguishable. They're really twin components of the same idea. The one feeds on the other. And once we regain that image, that much of the curriculum itself would be looked at much more critically, and our methods would be looked at much more critically with this firm philosophical base to work from.
Testing. What is your philosophy of education?
Yeah, I saw that question first. I don't know what that really means. Can you be more specific?
Well, originally we had what is your definition of education, but now we changed what's your philosophy. And if you want to take it as a math teacher philosophy, is just a general philosophy of education, the entire building, quite complex.
probably it's it's varied to a degree where it's difficult to explain. Basically, let's take different facets. It is certainly, in the classical sense of the word, to change behavior, whatever that means. We take basically in 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and try over a period of years to, quote, civilize, unquote, them. So the kind of thing where you try to say youngsters, let them live life, let them learn from life, and let them make helping every day an stimulating experience in terms of a learning situation. Basically, that's what it is. It also has many facets of it. It can be vocational nature. It can be certainly, and vocational, I don't mean that a guy learns to be an auto mechanic. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to also a person preparing to become an engineer, become a lawyer. It's vocational kind of education. Various aspects of it. There's also the cultural type of education, in which a boy or girl lives the kind of life he lives in society, assumes the attitudes and predilections of society as it's seen by all of them around him. It's a very fuzzy kind of thing to say. It involves a great deal much more thought than simply that.
Well,
there's certain aspects of it.
The next question I have is 2 parts, really 3, but the first 2 parts are, what role should you as a teacher play? And the second part is, what role should the student play?
Playing what?
In the educational system. How do you see your job, and how do you see really the job of the student, if you want to call it a job?
You call it a job of the student. I don't know if it can be totally classified as that, though I certainly expect that in reality it takes many of those aspects. That role is changing. We are constantly informed that the role of teacher is totally changing, undergoing change. The influence of teachers, per se, used to be different on what their role was in the classroom. We used to be the purveyors of knowledge 50, 60 years ago. We kind of got changed around to be that we were the motivators kind of situation. And I think we are entering into a new era. When we crossed over, I don't know. But the emphasis now on a teacher is that the emphasis on learning is the responsibility of the student, not of the teacher. Prior to this, it was our responsibility to motivate the youngster enough so that he can accept the kind of learning that we were willing to give them, the kind of methodology of learning, behavioral changes that take place. But what we're trying to do now, I think, and I'm pretty much ready to accept that kind of notation, is that we are indeed heading to a situation where we're going to be the guides along the tour. And the guide can be tripping out and we're just his leader. That's all. We're just along for the ride. This is the kind of role we see, and I think we're heading in that direction. I don't know what role we can individually play in it, but I think we're going that way. I think it's pretty clear that the role of the student, therefore, would be one that the emphasis is on him. Learning becomes his problem and not the teacher's problem. Now, if that shift does take place, and it is in many regards taking place, the whole curriculum, as we know it, is almost has to be antiquated, because what you're saying now is, okay, youngster, you tell me you get excited about something. Well, we can't expect him to get excited about all the things that we will usually try to motivate him to be excited about. We can't expect Doug did to be excited about math, science, social studies, and all those areas that we chose beforehand to give him. When they have to offer the potpourri, they taste the smorgasbord. At your own liking, at your own choosing, and so forth. But I suspect that probably we're heading towards some modified form of that in the near future.
Well, the last part of his question, I think, I don't know if you can answer it the way you developed that part, but I have that here. Is there anything preventing you and or the student from fulfilling this responsibility that you outlined? And if so, what? I don't know if you can answer
Sure.
the student.
Lots of things. Lots of things I think the students preventing. But let's take both of us together and see what that fills in. Certainly we're restricted by money. Certainly we're restricted by the building itself. We're certainly restricted as to what our morals and our ethical culture tells us is indeed the good aspects of society that we want to continue. If Beethoven is to be appreciated in its forms, should we expose the kid to Beethoven, as we did in the old way, and say, well, the exposure will help make him excited about it eventually? Or we just forget about it and say, well, rock and roll is going to be his bag, and that's fine. That's a new art form, and that's the one we'll use. Then what happens to all the past situations? I don't know. Basically, those are two. Money, limitation, size, physical limitations, that would be referred to. Emotional limitations, yes. I don't think that the society is ready for it yet, totally. And I don't think, pretty ticked off about the fact that society is going to take is choosing to take all its options at the discretion of the young people. I don't think that was intended. And I think it's like Topsy that kind of grew up, and I totally resent being lectured by young people in today's age, as much as young people resent being lectured by me. And I think I think if you want to call it a generation gap, that's one of the preventions.
You call it polarization.
Of the young?
No, not political.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Just
Age-wise.
No, not totally, except that if I have to read any more articles by some 19-year-old telling me what I have done wrong and what I continue to do wrong and how marvelous all the experiences they have are as opposed to my experiences, I'm going to resent it. I'm going to accept that 19-year-old, their points of view and so forth, but I don't want to be lectured to constantly. Okay. I think that's one of the areas where the difficulty lies.
What type of evaluation system do you use?
Okay, about just putting down grades in the report card.
And then the next question to that is, what type of evaluation system would you prefer to use if you had a choice?
I think I once told you in class last year, I think I told your class the situation that I'm pretty much hung up on the old virtues of the concept that you can really become president of the United States if you really put your mind on it, you're good enough and so forth, like a poor boy growing up on the East Side and so on and so on, like the Stivus or whatever it may be now. And I know that's not totally true, but I don't object to saying that there are certain, if you want to call this a job in terms of education, yes, that there are certain facets which must be gotten through into a scholarly kind of endeavor. You can't get them any other way. That education is truly itself an end. I think that's one of my feelings about it. That the intellectual joy of education that's it. I mean, that's enough stimulation. I really don't care where my mathematics takes me if I enjoy doing what I'm doing, kind of thing. And a lot of it is hard work. You've got to sit down and plod through much of it. But that's the kind of a situation, and I think the same thing with youngsters. They can do that kind of a thing. Now, the other question was then? Where was I heading with that?
What type of educational system,
evaluation
system would you prefer?
So, we're talking about basically that I think every step along the way, you've got to put a this is good and this is bad kind of situation. I'm not sure why, but I'm saying somewhere along the way you got to say that's nonsense, that's unacceptable, and so forth. I have no objection to unacceptable as opposed to acceptable. That's an acceptable learning experience. That's an unacceptable learning experience. Leave it at that. Modification between numeric numbers and that would certainly be the ABCD system, but that's not really much change. You wind up with A minuses and B pluses, the distinction between those two. I use basically the kind of performance I'm looking for in examination in terms of the goals I'm looking to do. If I set my goals for the class and what I'm trying to accomplish with that group, I've seen that they can participate by themselves, seen that they can do some learning on their own, seen that they can do the kind of, and the learning they do, that does follow from that. We're talking about examinations, physical written examinations and so forth. Pretty much I stick to that. In terms of the objectives I've established, does this student come up how well to the objectives? And that's a total arbitrary figure, and that's, I think, the thing I object to most, not necessarily the goal, but evaluating those goals in terms of numbers.
First question I have is, what is your philosophy of education? If you just sum it up as if we're ending the tape.
Right. It's philosophy of education it's a very difficult thing to express. There's really no one sentence or one short paragraph which can express how I feel about education. I do feel very strongly that, let me put my philosophy in terms of a goal, and that would be to help an individual open himself up for new experiences in a completely objective way. In other words, to truly be unbiased in hearing different ideas and interchanging ideas with not only his teachers but with his peers, and to really try to understand what is happening. And if this idea differs with the way an individual feels, that he will listen to it, understand it, not necessarily to agree, but just to try and understand how another person feels. I think this is one of the things that has to be done with not only people involved in an educational system, but with people in our society. We have to be able to open ourselves up and be able to listen and understand, not necessarily agree with, but listen and understand about other ideas.
Next question I have is, you may have answered this one, part of it anyway. What role should the student play in the supply system, and what role should the teacher play? And what, if anything, is preventing you from playing this role, or the ideal role that you see them playing?
One of the things that appeals to me today is some of the experimentation going on in education. And that is student participation in setting up curriculums. I think we talked about the new project over in the Great Neck schools. What was it called? The village school out in Great Neck. I would like to see some technique or some device developed where students can really express what they would like to. Sorry, I can express this. What they could derive out of their educational experience, so to say. What they would like to become involved with here in school, other than this, the ordinary type of curriculum that we go through, the math, the English, the science, the health, and this type of thing. Some setup developed so that they could really have a voice and express themselves as to what they would want to do. Now, there are a lot of people I know who are very dissatisfied with the way things are going right now, and yet offer, no solutions or no suggestions. I don't say this as a down. I say this that from a teacher's point of view, from an educator's point of view, that would be his role, to help the student be able to discover what it really is that he would like to do. This also, a very difficult thing to do. But these are the roles. I think that was what you had asked. I would like to see students become more involved in what's happening inside these four walls, what's happening inside North High School. And yet, a lot of them are not capable of doing this. This I realize too. And I would like to see my role change to be able to help them do this. I think it's a very difficult thing. I say this because I realize a great deal of dissatisfaction exists. And I don't know if we're moving along the lines to change these things.
Well, what do you think is preventing us from moving along those lines?
Well, it seems to me that change of any kind comes very slowly. People are frightened or unsure of themselves when something new occurs, when new ideas are presented. In a very, very superficial way, you think back to the reactions when fellows started wearing their hair a little bit longer. Oh, somebody grew sideburns, right away he was this or that, and we put labels on it. And now it's a very common thing, and we don't think anything of it when somebody walks around with long hair. Mini skirts. I mean, a lot of people, especially in the older generation, frowned upon. This was terrible. Now we've swung back. Now we're wearing middies or maxis or whatever you want, and that'll be in just as much as minis were. We swing, in cycles. Things are constantly changing, and people react this way to change. They're frightened by it. They're unsure of themselves. They don't see themselves or how they themselves should be acting when change occurs. I think the same thing happens in education. I don't know if I could really put my finger on what is holding us back.
I think you've answered that.
Okay.
Third question is, what frustrates you as a teacher most?
This involves, or it could get into really a lengthy explanation. The thing that I'm most concerned with now is I see a great deal of apathy on the part of some of the senior high students, the 10th, 11th, 12th grade students that I have come in contact with. And I think that apathy is the most dangerous situation that can exist. I say this because if a person is completely apathetic, then nothing will happen with him one way or the other. I think if a person has strong beliefs, whether they agree with mine, right or wrong, good or bad, he is thinking and he's got feelings and everything else. I see so many people who have, it seems to me, thrown in the towel. Now, I don't condemn them when I say this. I condemn the circumstances that have forced or caused them to react this way. I guess now we go back to the system. We're going to go right back to talking about a philosophy of education, what kind of roles I would like to play, what kind of roles I would like the students to play. Apathy is something that has to be worked at. I mean, you're just not born apathetic. There are things that occur, and as a result, you become apathetic. I think a great many people have had a great many ideals, a great many desires, and they've been frustrated for so long that they have thrown in the towel. I think you see that not only in a student situation as we have here at North High School, but you see this in the adult world. You see a lot of people literally throwing in the towel. And we've talked about this, suicide rates, divorces, the amount of mental illness in our country. This, in a way, is throwing in the towel. Apathy is a sickness of some kind. And I see this. I think you see that right here in our small group that we have. It's obvious that we have people in here who are not because they're turned off by the subject matter. It's because they haven't given the subject matter a chance. And the subject matter is you people. You're the ones that are doing a great deal of the talking. It's things that are happening here and now, or at least it's attempted to be that way. And yet no chance is given.
The ideal educational system is one in which everybody benefits from, including the student, the teacher, and those in the community. What would be the foundation you would lay to get that ideal educational system? What would be the start?
Where did you get this? That this is the ideal, educational system.
That this is present?
No, that your description of what the ideal system is, where teachers can benefit, students can benefit, the community can benefit. That's the way you feel personally.
You don't dispute it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not, Doug, don't get me wrong, I'm not, you see, I don't know anymore whether a school can, be any kind of ideal. See. Because if a school or if an educational system is truly doing what I would like to see happen, I think it's going to be a center for controversy, a center for action, a center for reaction, this type of thing. Benefits, to a community or to an individual student, to an educator, to a faculty member, in this type of system would, I think, at times be very difficult to measure. It's like, how are you going to measure attitude, or how are you going to measure success? Because what is success to you may be something entirely different to somebody else. To me, I may be trying to accomplish something which I can hardly even verbalize. I had a great deal of difficulty a short while ago explaining to you, what I would like to do. It's not an easy thing to talk about. How do you measure whether a student, has really opened himself up for understanding, not only himself but others around him? What's going on around him, in a truly objective way. I mean, I might hate your guts, but I'll tell you something. You sit in this class, and I'm listening to every word you say. Now, we have feelings. I'm a human being. I have feelings about the people who sit in my classroom. And even those that at times arouse very negative feelings on my part, I'm very careful to listen to, perhaps even more than those that I feel strongly about or positively about. How are you going to measure if people can do this? If this is what is really going to benefit people? I find a great deal, of difficulty in myself in handling this situation. How are we going to accomplish this and still present, a good deal of the traditional factual information, which is very necessary? In a subject area such as health, where we're concerned with drugs and narcotics, or we're concerned with tobacco or alcohol or sex, and sexual values and changes that are going on, it's easy because we've built the foundation of mental health, of understanding certain types of behavior, how people adjust, and we have the factual information. Now we're just trying to understand behavior within this factual information. But how do you do this in say, something like math or calculus, where it's just one thing right after another? Is there time for understanding, other people? How about in science? Do you take time out to understand one another, or what? I don't know how it can be applied in these other areas. I'm just not knowledgeable in the other academic subjects. I mean, I know what's happening here, and I know what can happen here, and I think it can be applied, but I just haven't figured it out. I'm just not smart enough to know how it can be applied in different subjects. I think it goes on in social studies. I think it goes on in humanities, perhaps, as a way of doing it, other English subjects. But in some of the highly disciplined science, math, this type of thing, I don't know. It's a hard thing to resolve. The ideal school situation, if you can talk about it, if you can verbalize it, then perhaps we'd have it. Perhaps it would be a reality. And that's why I can't talk about it. I don't know if I can accept that statement, that it would benefit, all. What is the ideal? I think if anybody could point their finger at it or express exactly what it was, we would have it. We don't have it, that's for sure. We have a good deal of unhappiness. We have dissatisfaction. And it's not only one way. It's not only from the students towards the faculty or the administration, but it's certainly a great deal of dissatisfaction from the faculty towards students and from administration towards students. For example, I expressed, just my own point of view, the apathy, a great deal of dissatisfaction. I mean, I have had people, and again, I don't condemn the individual, but I've had people who come in here from the first day, turn me off, and turn the rest of you people off. Now, I'm reacting for myself, but I do know that they turn other people in our class off. I want to react from my point of view. They have not given me the chance. And yet some of them express a great deal of dissatisfaction with what's going on here. You see. Now, I condemn them for that type of attitude. I understand why. I understand how it's come about. But there's dissatisfaction, on my part, too. I've gone on and on, so let's go on to the next.
Okay. The next question is, do you believe in a tracking system? We have one.
This you mean like honors and regents and that? Okay. Now, I've been told by some of my colleagues that there are certain subjects that you just can't do it in. Math, again, I get back to math and science and, and this type of thing. Now, there must be reasons. They know, a lot more than I do about this. However, I do know that in subjects such as health, in subjects such as English, social studies, and by the way, it is going on now in social studies, junior high level, it's a reality. Now, whether it's successful or not, or whether it's working or not, or whether it's failing or not, I think has to be measured. I know that from my point of view, we've survived in health in this class, in this one particular academic subject. We've survived. I enjoy it. I think the people enjoy it. Some of them have expressed. People, now I don't know if we've gotten around to talking about it with your particular group, but there have been people in the past who have expressed to me that they were so happy because after 6 years in North High School, they finally met You know, the Italian kids who were always in the NR group, or the Jewish kids who were always in the honors group. You know, we did get around to that. We expressed the fact that, you know, well, somebody said, well, you know, all the Jews are in honors, and all the Italians are in NR, non-regents, and this type of thing. And hey, you know, all of a sudden we find human beings. They're real people. You know, it's not just those kids or that group. Just from this, you see, this point of view alone, I've been thrilled. And it talks about, like, one of my ideals and one of my objectives is the fact that somebody in here at one time or another is really opening themselves up and trying to find out, hey, what makes the other person tick? You know, what's really going on? So, as a general statement, I would say to you that I don't believe in tracking, I don't believe in grouping of any kind, because it points out differences among people. I think it's the same thing when you talk about black and white. There are differences. Yeah, they exist in the same way they exist between, you know, honors and regular regions or regions and non. There are differences. This is a reality. This, you know, perhaps we can't do anything about the same way we can't change the color of a person's skin. But it highlights the differences. It points out the differences. Instead of getting people closer together and understanding one another, we accentuate it by saying, you know, you're in the NR. Now, a kid in an NR group says, yeah, I'm a dummy. You know, I'm a modified. You know, what's a modified? Oh, you're stupid, you know. Now, we have a lot of the younger kids that say, what's a modified? They don't know it. They see it on their programs. It hasn't been explained to them. They point out differences. Now, the 7th grade level, all the classes are not grouped. I guess there's an honors math, that's it. And we're into November already, and so far nobody's killed themselves, and the building is still here. So something is happening. You know, I think it'll take time to evaluate.
Do you feel that students come to school with a genuine interest in learning? And if not, what can be done to rectify that?
You know, again, I think we have to define terms and understand, you know, why. If you say to me, there's a 5 or 6 year old kid, but you know, when he enters kindergarten or 1st or 2nd grade, I say, yeah, you know, he comes to learn for whatever learning is, you know, to him at that particular time. If you say learning is, you know, learning is something simple as learning is change or learning is experience, learning is something new that's happening to you, not necessarily a factual information, but something, you know, something different. Learning is change. Okay. Yeah, they come and they're excited about it. You know, I told you about the few years I spent at the elementary level. There's a great deal of exuberance. There's a great deal of excitement. You know, some of the seniors come into the 7th grade classes here and they sit with the kids and they talk, and they'll go back to a senior class and say, oh man, what's happened to us in the 6 years here at North High School? You know, we're a bunch of deadheads. We sit around and do nothing. So, you know, none of your group has come into any of my other classes to even, you know, be able to talk about it. But, you know, that's up to them. I think after a while, I think there are students, there's a segment of our student population who do not necessarily come here to learn. And this perhaps goes back to, again, that apathetic group. And what can be done to change it is getting back to your ideal, or what you would like to, you know, or what I would like to see, not as an ideal. I said I don't know what the ideal is, but rather to change the situation so that they're not apathetic. To change the situation that it becomes something enjoyable, pleasurable, beneficial. They're interested. They want to come here because it's a nice place to come to. It's a happy place. It's a place where things happen. It's not a place to come to where you can slump back in a chair and fall asleep, as you've seen here. Even when things, you know, are pretty, you know, exciting, maybe, you know, for lack of a better term, where, you know, we go at it pretty good, we laugh or, you know, joke around, and there are people who are asleep. Some of them even close their eyes. You know, others are just sleeping with their eyes open. What can be done, again, is getting back to the idea of change, student involvement, student planning, you know, this type of thing. Very difficult tasks, but possible.
What kind of evaluation system do you use?
Do I use? Do I use with the students? In my evaluation of them, All right. We're limited here in a certain way because there are rules, regulations set up by a Board of Education. There are grades that have to be determined, report card marks to be given. I would like to see an experiment, for example, in my area. It's been talked about for a while. I think it quite possibly could be done in an academic subject such as health, and the way we conduct it, that there would not necessarily be a numerical grade given. Evaluation, you see, takes many forms from my point of view. I'll evaluate a student in a way to obtain a numerical grade so that I can put it down on a report card. But there's also a great deal going on in my mind as to other kinds of evaluation. In my mind, a much more important kind of evaluation than that which I can put down on a report card, an 80 or 85, you're a 90 or you're an 86. The kind of evaluation is, what kind of human being is this? What he or she is going to be or has become, this type of thing. Not that I know the answers, but I'm thinking about this in terms of this individual. I'm much more interested in knowing people and how they think and feel, and we can do that in this type of subject. See, so I'm evaluating the person as an individual, his personality, his behavior, the way he relates, the way he talks, this type of thing. Now, evaluation, as far as a report card is concerned, we have a couple of examinations, written examinations, the type of activity this person does in class. This all has an effect on the grade as such. But again, the other kind of evaluation is that which I'm, much more interested in. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't put down like written examinations because I think factual information is very important. I think a person has to have factual information. One of the things that we're concerned with in here is decision making. People have to make decisions about certain things that are going on around them. Very important decisions. Now, you can't make a decision unless you have factual information. It's a very difficult thing to get across to a lot of people here because they're not interested in this kind of thing. This is the kind of experience that they have been having, and they don't like it, and they're tired of it. So we get in here and we want to talk about, I want to talk about sex, or I want to talk about the changing values, or I want to talk about drugs, or this kind of experience, you say. And yet, so many myths exist. We dispelled one just the other day in a very quick time. The girls from the marriage class came in, and we told them, how are you going to tell somebody is a virgin? Are you going to tell them or this? And one of the guys asked, well, won't you know? And, so, this idea of virginity and, that dispelled. There's a factual information, that came up in a very informal way, but yet it was a fact, an important fact, and it's going to affect how he now feels about a certain situation. I believe very strongly that person must know the facts. You yourself, I know you became involved in this political stuff, and you went out and you campaigned and things, and you, in order to make a decision politically, must know factual information. Now, they talk about the 18-year-old having votes. I wouldn't want to see this group of people in our classroom vote for the President of the United States. You got, 30 people sitting in this class, and I dare say 10 even knew who were involved in the local elections. And now we're going to ask them to make decisions on a national level? Well, I don't think the way we have it right now that I would want, this group of people. They're not, so many of them are so apathetic, they're not ready to do this type of thing. And again, I will get caught in the trap because probably out of the adults of voting age, if you take 30 of them, only 10 really know the issues anyway. So maybe what I'm saying is all a bunch of nonsense. I don't know. Maybe it is.
3 things that are most important to you as a teacher. Okay, put down. Got this with you across.
The 3 things that are most important to me as a teacher in relationship to my work. Wow. Well, I don't know if I could give you 3, Doug, because I'm really only concerned with one thing. I'm concerned, as many people are, with what's going on in our society today. We have a great many depressing things going on. We have a drug and narcotic epidemic. We have, without going into the particulars, we have a great deal of illness, of mental illness in our society. And I am concerned, and through my job, through my role here, of helping people to understand themselves, what is going on around them, to the best of my ability. My ability is limited, and I say this in all sincerity. I'm not saying this to be modest or to put myself down or anything. I think we all have, definite limitations. I hope to establish some kind of relationship with people to be able to do this. And again, not an easy task. But this is why I'm here. This is why I'm doing an education. And like I say, I don't know if I could give you three. This is primarily the only thing that's really important to me. Factual information, yes, okay. I can give you a textbook to read and get facts. But, this feeling, this helping people understand, of breaking down barriers, that's what's important to me.
And if I can squeeze this last question in, one message that you'd like, if you could, to get across to the students, the administration, and the teachers.
Well, this is also a terrific question, and it's one that I often, talk about. It's funny, it came up in this class a while ago. We're talking about ideals, and that was in relationship to the film Hospital that we saw, where an old nurse was putting down a younger nurse, because she wanted to take care of that young kid who was abandoned. I think that my message is that we all develop ideals as we grow and mature. My advice to older people, myself and others like us, is I think that we lose the spark, we lose the burning desire, the impatience with things that we truly believe in. And we become very patient, and we become more patient, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves lackadaisical or completely apathetic. I'm saying, in a way, we lose our ideals. To the young people who have these ideals, the great impatience, the need to have things done here and now, I would like to see them try to understand that change takes a little bit more time, just a little bit more time than they are willing to allow. Not much more, because then you become like many of the older people are. To the point where, and I put myself right in this category, where some of our ideals, which we, at one time held to be so important and dear to us, are lost.
Leads to this concept of having the industry involved directly with school on the outside. Con Edison originally started out sending their instructors into the schools to teach. They found this didn't work. Now what they do is on the job, just like the English system. These underprivileged youngsters, educationally disadvantaged, are taught on the job by the instructors right then and there in the factories or in the various training centers. Chase Manhattan, the bank, runs the same thing. They bring these people in and they have them work in the bank and at the same time go to school. They found it works better to have the school in the community rather than send the industry into the school. But this is a continuing experience, and those that have done the most work in it have found it is better to work the way I'm indicating. And I personally feel this would be ideal. Even for the students who are going on to the most advanced areas, I think that the experience gained by working at the executive level, say, for a youngster who's going on to MIT or Harvard or whatnot, would give him a greater insight into what it is he must learn when he's at school. So that is my idea. It's a utopia. Will it ever come? I can't say, but it is being done in isolated places around the country. Only the future will tell, and of course the most important part is the cost. I think the money is the biggest problem, because the students are being paid while they're working, and their rate of pay is determined by how well they succeed in their studies. This helps a lot. I'm sure a lot of students in this school, if they were paid for their A's and B's and C's, how well they perform, would approach it with a much more intense attitude than they do now. They do not get any immediate rewards. The rewards for good grades here come later, when you leave. But what we need now for some of these youngsters is immediate rewards that they can see. And money is an excellent reward.
Next question I have is the three things that are most important to you as a teacher are.
Well, I can't call them things. As a teacher, the most important to me are my students. I'm in teaching because I want to work with people, because I want to help them. Having been a pilot involved in aviation, I find many of the teachers here have been involved in similar other areas prior to coming into teaching, where they could have earned a good livelihood in a profession other than teaching. But it did not give them the emotional satisfaction, the satisfaction of feeling that they are accomplishing something other than just earning money. These factors, I think, are more important to many, many teachers. Some people talk about job security, but I think today, the way industry is set up, with the exception, of course, engineering on Long Island, most jobs offer very good security today in America. And the idea that teaching is a place to go so you'll be comfortable and not have to worry about the future, I don't think that is valid for the type of teachers we have here at North, at least the ones I work with. They're here because they want to be, because they want to work with youngsters. They want to have a feeling, as I do, that after 4 years or 6 years of working with students, that the youngster has benefited by the relationships between the two of them. I prefer to call it teamwork. Try to work as a team. I try to work with the parents, the student, and myself together, and that together, the three of us, mutually working towards one common goal, that is the betterment of the youngster. When I'm done at the end of the school day, I want to feel that I have accomplished something that will carry on. And looking at my own children, I say to myself that here's the ultimate purpose and goal of all mankind, is to perpetuate the human race and to make it better than it is. And I feel as a teacher that number one to me is that I am helping youngsters become better everything, better citizens, better students, to understand life better, to appreciate it better. And when I'm done, at the end of the day, I'd like to feel that I've done something that has advanced, if I may use a cliche, advanced mankind one step forward. That I have at least helped build up rather than tear down. That I have done something that will make the world a little bit better. And the way I do it, and the way we teachers do it, is we do it by working with youngsters who in turn will work with others, who in turn will work with others. If we do a good job with a student, we hope that his children in turn will be better. The purpose of any teacher, in my point of view, is to, number one, have a student come into a classroom at a certain level, but leave at a much higher. My success to me is when a student knows more than I do when he leaves. I think I've done a job. I'm never ashamed when I find a student that knows more than I do. I think that's a mark of success. I think it's a mark of having achieved the goal I've set out to do. That when I find a youngster that's smarter than I am, that knows more than I am, that can do things better than I can, I feel there I have achieved success. I've done well. And all the others in the school have done well. And I'm proud of it. And at the end of the year, if we feel our students are better than they were, and that each generation to come is a better generation, then I feel very, very happy that I've succeeded in my goal. Much of the student disorder in the country, much of the revolt, if you wish to use that, some of it has been bad because it has been led by so-called radicals who haven't known how to approach it. But I say much of it, a great deal of it has been because we've done our job right. They are not willing to accept the status quo. When they see something is wrong, they are not going to say, well, somebody else will do it. They're going to do it. And I think this is a product of our teaching. We've tried to teach, and I've tried to teach, to always do better, to always achieve more, to always look for a better goal. And if you can't get it now, why not? And let's go find it. And so when they demand, or when they ask, or when they search, such as you're searching, I think that that is a result of successful teaching. And if in some instances they've turned on us and said, you are inadequate, you're inefficient, you're not doing your job, I would say in some instances we probably haven't, because we haven't made it clear to them that the very things that they are searching for is a result of our teaching. Not only myself as an individual, but teaching in whole, in total. That we have set up this so-called revolution, this desire to do better. But even in my own profession, I do, as I mentioned earlier, have many frustrations because I want a change now, the same as you do. But I am older and more mature, and I understand that I must have the facts, the statistics, I must know where I'm going before I make the change. Well, we have taught you people to look for these changes too. And as I've indicated here, you are now working with the teachers, you're working with the parents, you're working with fellow students. You have found the key. And if you can continue as you are, I see not only a change to this school, which when you leave here, you'll probably go on to a college. I see you making changes there. I see that when you finish school and go into industry, that if you run into the same thing, you will make changes there. I see you making a better world for me, and I feel better for it. And those are, in total, all three combined as one, what I personally feel as a teacher. And I'm very proud of what you people are doing. I can't take the credit for you personally because I haven't taught you, but other of my fellow teachers have taught you from kindergarten up, and you are a product of our educational system. And hopefully you're going to change it for even the better, as we want to ourselves.
And then in concluding this interview, if you get one message out to everybody out there who's concerned about this school, education, and the whole, what might that message be, including parents?
All right. I would say the one message is that, first of all, it's teamwork, which you've already begun to learn. That you work as a team, the teachers, the parents, and the students. That's the first thing. You must work together. You must find a level of understanding, communications, and a system whereby you will arrive at conclusions satisfactory to all of you, and then from there work together. I feel that this type of approach, specifically in the area of where the actual power itself lies, in that the parents are the only legal body that have the right to make any changes, legally. So therefore it is the role of the teacher, the administrators, and the students to get together with the parents, and all of them agree as to what is best, why it's best, and where they're going to go. And then the parents, who are the only people who can elect people to the Board of Education, who can elect people to office in our country, elect the right people to make the type of changes that they wish. This is what our democracy is all about. This is what is meant to work. This goes back almost to the old concept of the town meeting. Now, you, as a group, have found the key. Now, if you use it properly, you can build for all of us, every one of us, the students, the teachers, and the parents, the ideal type of school, the ideal type of world, if you use it properly. It can also be abused. And it's because of this abuse that one must be careful, that you don't get extreme radicals who want changes that aren't realistic, that they will ultimately doom us to some type of anarchy and failure. But if you have an intelligent, step-by-step approach, getting your facts and figures together, working it out together as a team. I keep emphasizing the team approach. Then your parents, after they've been thoroughly convinced that what you're indicating here is proper, it's what we all want, then they can go and vote, and the changes will come into being. This is still the most powerful tool in the world, the electoral system. Whether it's to elect someone to office for a state or local government, to elect somebody to the Board of Education, all of these people are there to make these choices and decisions that the majority rules, and even the minority. What you've done now, the announcement this morning, where you have already started to have, at the highest level in the district, discussions about the draft counselor, have shown the proper approach. And I feel this is the way to do it. And then ultimately your parents will be involved to the extent that they will say that we will elect to various offices those people who work with us on the team, who understand what we're trying to do. And together, and it's the important part, together we will make the changes that we like to see. But we'll do it neatly and orderly and with due process. And that's the one thing that I feel above all I want to tell you, because it will make our world a better world. And I'm sure from what I've seen in this school, I made this statement earlier, in comparing this school with other schools on Long Island and elsewhere, reading the newspapers, we're approaching it the right way, and we're being successful. Other schools are approaching it violently and disorderly, and they are not achieving anything except disruption and chaos and confusion. And one of our own local schools nearby is an emphasis of that. The end result was all the key students and the key parents just left. They went off to private schools, and they destroyed the system. Whereas here, I think we're doing far, far better, the students especially, and they are creating a better school system. You personally, and the group that you're working with, I think can look back on 2 years of very successful, very, very successful achievements, gaining goals. And I have known that I've sat with teachers in lunches and a teachers' lounge, and they've been excited by the things you've done, excited by the thinking that's going on with their students, and the ideas that the students want to accomplish. And it's a very positive approach, and it's a very happy approach. So I'll repeat the last message. I think I've said it 3 times, which is what I like to do. Tell you what I'm going to tell you, and tell you what I told you, is that you have found a key. It's a team approach, that we all work together, and when you have all the facts and figures to prove your point, then you go ahead and you make your move in an orderly, democratic fashion. Finish.
Are you going to answer?
What is your philosophy of education?
I think the first thing in discussing the philosophy of education, you have to consider students as people. If you like people, you like students, you like kids. And you can't go into teaching without liking people. I think this is what's often wrong with some teachers. They're not people likers. Another thing I would say, my philosophy of education, is that people are always learning. The school is not the end of education, nor the only means they earn by living. Actually, living is education. Okay.
What role should the student play, and is there anything preventing you and/or the student from playing this role?
Well, the teacher, as an experienced person, should be a guide, sometimes an authority, but mostly a guide to furthering the education. The teacher should not be a dictator, nor should the teacher be permissive, but should give the opportunity for the student to learn as much as possible on their own experiences and their own action. The student, of course, must come in with a willingness to learn more than anything else. If the student is willing to learn, very often the experiences in the classroom will be fruitful. I imagine the thing that's holding back accomplishing the purposes that you would like to see in education would be size of classes. Most of them are still too big. 25 might be an ideal number for an average class, but very often you need much smaller numbers for a slower class and even at times an honor class so that you could really reach out what you want to do.
System do you use, and what type of evaluation system would you prefer to use?
At the present time, in most cases, I give a straight average of their marks. I'm not satisfied with it, but I have to live with it because the size of the class alone prohibits any other system. Very often, however, if a student is failing but trying their hardest, the student will always pass. What I would like to see, rather than taking the average of a test, judging a student on their activities, participation projects, individual study, all this sort of thing, or what they have changed in attitude. Very often this is not capable of being marked. I've seen remarkable change of attitudes occasionally in students wherein their scholastic mark isn't very high, but yet their attitude has become so greatly enriched that I often feel I would like to have some way of marking it. In those cases, of course, I do raise the mark, but I don't think it really tells what gain has been accomplished during that particular term for this individual student.
Genuine interest in learning, and if not, why? And what could be done to rectify the situation?
I'm not sure they come to school with a genuine interest in learning. The last few years have been very much upset, as many other teachers have been, where we know that the students tune out on us, and yet some of us try very, very hard, and we don't really know why they tune out. Perhaps it's the times, perhaps it's the method of teaching, perhaps it's the curriculum. However, I think a further search has to be made for why, in my particular case, as many other people. However, I think if classes were smaller, if very often the curriculum were more relevant, if they had perhaps less compulsory education, there are some students who would be happier, more benefit to themselves, the community, their families, if they were perhaps working or doing some sort of social service or whatever they will. These, of course, don't like to learn. They don't feel that they have any part in the school system. But I think for the bulk of the student, better courses, smaller classes, maybe better equipment and so forth, so that they can go on their own and follow what they truly interest them. I'm not sure at this time. I've been thinking it over. The social studies department has been discussing this for the past few months and even into last year. I could see certain advantages for the tracking system, but I could see certain social disadvantage for the tracking system, and I haven't as yet made up my mind. One thing is very definite. Many teachers, including myself, will have to be retrained if the school goes completely for heterogeneous teaching. I think the ordinary routine of periods starting at a certain time, ending at a certain time, certain duties at a specific time, report cards due specifically. The routine, I think, is now getting to the point where it kills rather than helps in learning. Perhaps maybe a system of modular scheduling might help, or maybe individualized study might help, but I know that for the student to come into the same class day in and day out, sit in the same classroom, to go through the routine itself is destroying what you're trying to accomplish. It destroys spontaneity. It destroys, it makes habit rather than the desire for learning, the purpose.
One that every person, including student, teacher, and community, would benefit from. But one aspect of the educational system would you change or add to in order to reach that goal if you were in a position to do so?
I think I would like to change somewhat the structure. I feel that a person, whether young or old, should be a student continually. I feel it shouldn't be so required to say get a high school degree, but nor should that be the end of education. College should be less structured, and education should be looked upon as a lifetime thing. It should be much easier for adults to go to school, to take a course that interests them at the moment, or even for students to do this, to take other courses more than merely that were required, but that would make the person grow as the interest comes, whether it be gardening, auto mechanics, art, history, it doesn't matter. It should be a continual process, and it should be easy to take part in, and it should be from the very, very beginning to the very, very end of a person's life.
That are most important to you as a teacher are?
I would say the first most important thing is to see growth in a student. It isn't enough to pass or even to go to a good college, but to see a growth in understanding, in tastes, in interests, desires, see an interest in art, music, in politics, in the condition of the world, in having sympathy for those less fortunate for ourselves, a continual growth and expansion constantly. As I've mentioned before, I have seen students grow tremendously, although they were not necessarily scholars. These students benefited the most, and I feel these are by far the most important that have accomplished. Second, of course, was that a teacher must somehow help everyone, whether or not they be scholars or very, very slow, whether they be popular or unpopular. Somehow a teacher must mean something to all the students, and of course this is very, very difficult to accomplish, but yet the effort must continually be made so that everyone is in some way helped. Students should, after having a teacher for a year, feel richer. Tragically, this doesn't always happen. The teacher must believe what he's doing. It's not enough to be a 9-to-3 employee, not enough merely to collect a salary. I've always been looked upon teaching as being a vocation, a sort of dedication, wherein when teacher salaries were bad, still teachers went into it because they felt, in a way, they had a mission to perform. Somehow they would feel, in some way, they would help change the life of their students for the better.
One message to all those interested in the educational system and what's going on today. What might that message be?
I think the message I'd like to give, that any teacher should give, is this: that life is beautiful, that life is worthwhile. Just now we're very, very much aware of the problems we're having in this country, alienation and violence and dissatisfaction. But in spite of all of these things, which are true, life is still a beautiful thing, and life is very, very much worthwhile. And that life has always been a mixture of happy events and unhappy events. And in most cases, the happy events, the better events, far encompass the tragic or the sad events. The teacher should see life as a beautiful thing to be lived through, and that this idea should get across to the students, so that the students should want to live and have a real excitement in living. If there is no excitement in living, there can be no excitement in learning, there can be no excitement in doing, and life is really worthwhile.
I think it's the development of the whole person, and also all the kids are aware of things. I think the awareness is very keen, but if this awareness is to be turned into something that is knowledge. Awareness itself is not knowledge. So it's the development of this knowledge from awareness.
Okay, what role do you think you should play as a teacher?
Ideally, I should just provide people with materials and act as a consultant and a helper rather than the initiator of instruction. The kid should initiate the instruction. We have to set a framework for it. But then I would see my role then as being a person who can lead him to more of the same things. How this would be accomplished now, that would have to, it would involve a great deal of change in our attitudes toward the whole process. In other words, we should act as diffusers rather than of providers and lecturers and all the rest of it. We should just diffuse the information, and the kid himself should be able to accomplish it.
What role do you think the student should
I think a student's role has to change from a passive role to a very active role. He must be the individual who is concerned with the learning. Right now, I think it's the teacher that's concerned with the student learning something. The student has to be concerned with him learning himself, and then be able to use the teacher as a medium, as a media consultant. In other words, to point him where to find information and to provide him with information. But fortunately, I don't think kids use the teachers as that in this role right now. They don't see the teacher in this role. They see him in the role as a person who gives out information. That's all. When it shouldn't be that way. The teacher should get more or less provide information, but the student should be the one that should get it and dispense it to himself.
Is there anything that you think is preventing you or the student from fulfilling this responsibility that you just outlined? And if so, what?
General attitudes. Everyone's general attitudes. The attitude, it took us a long time to establish the education system the way it is today. And I think we're afraid to change it. And I don't only blame the teachers or administrators for this, I blame the kids for it. We are unsure of what it's going to be like. Maybe we aren't willing to take the step in that direction, but the kids aren't either. They're so used to a system. They're securing a system. They know what's going to happen. They know they can count on that grade, whatever that happens to be. And we're perfectly willing to live with that, and so are they. And the only way it's going to change is when we force each other into a change. Will it come? I don't know. But I think that I think we're both pretty content with it. We get rumblings now and then, but kids, by and large, are still pretty content with the way it is, and so are we, because nobody's any problem, and we're unsure of what lies ahead if we change.
What type of evaluation system do you use?
Well, I use a system that the school gives me, the estimate system. I do feel that I should give a certain amount of tests, a certain amount of writing assignments within a given period. Classwork and oral work is important, and I do play the numbers game. I do give assigned numbers to this. I'm going to try this year, though, to make it a personal type of evaluation for kids that I feel who are, let's say, doing outstanding work and contributing a little more to something should be given some sort of personal recognition for this. And I don't mean it like an awards thing, but I do mean the teacher's commendation, sort of a personal exchange between that student and that teacher about what that teacher feels that they've done. And I will try to do this. It's one of the facets for the pass-fail. You know, they do set up a pass-fail system. One of the things required is that each kid get a personal evaluation so that he knows where he stands in the passing range or in the failing range. In other words, the reason for whatever he got.
The next question I have is, what system would you prefer to use? If you could change your system, use the good points, get rid of the bad points, what would you like to do?
Well, simply because with the amount of students we have, the numbers is the easiest way to evaluate them, and the kids themselves have an idea of what each number means and where they stand. But I think a modification of it to some extent, where, let's say, a personal sort of communication is set up between the teacher and the student, be it on an oral basis or be it a letter type of thing. With the amount of students we have, we couldn't do the letter. We couldn't write an evaluation for each kid. You can't do it when you have 150 kids or 120 kids. But you could do it if you had less. But to take the place of this, maybe we could have a personal type of exchange. Well, smaller classes would necessarily, if you're going to change the grading system and everything else, you're going to have to consider the amount of people per teacher. Now, of course, the realistic situation is that you don't have that many teachers, you don't have that many classrooms, you don't have that many facilities. But ideally, we're speaking, yeah, I think we should have smaller classes. The size of your class is a good size class. 19. When everybody's there, it's 19. If you were there, 15, 14. That's ideal, and you can function that way. But when you have 31 or 32, and if 30 of those kids are doing a good job and you want to commend them for it, that makes it tough. And it's much easier than to give them a 90 and E on the report card, and then they know.
Do you feel that students come to school with a genuine interest in life?
No.
If not, what do you think can be done to change this?
Well, it becomes a complete change, first of all, in general attitudes toward education. I really don't think the kids understand particularly what education is. And I think our whole way of life has caused this decline in the part that education plays in a person's life. Kids aren't aware of the fact how important it is. The school will have to change, sure. The school may be one inhibiting factor right now. The kids aren't really interested because they've been working for goals which are immediate. The goal of getting the 90 is the immediate goal, without any consideration really as to the future or how this education is going to be put into practice. I think it's a whole attitude change on the part of. And the attitude change is going to have to originate with somebody. I guess it's going to have to originate with the teacher, I don't know, or with the school system. But the attitude change must originate somewhere. And until that comes along, we're just treading on very soft ground. But I think basically the kids aren't interested simply because there's no reason to be. If you're working towards an immediate goal, in other words, a goal that can be realized in 2 weeks, and you achieve that goal, well, that's fine. You've done that. But if you can sort of bring out that the goal is not an immediate thing, that there is a greater goal to achieve, in other words, the truly well-rounded individual, the truly humane individual, the person has to be. I think education perhaps has made the kid forget this, and consequently that he's not interested in learning much, only interested in learning for the immediate test. And not realizing that what he learns can be in some way, shape, or form used later.
What is your philosophy of education?
What is my philosophy of education? I think that a good philosophy of education is a type of philosophy which meets the needs of a student. Now, the needs of a student could vary. Some of the needs of some of our students tend to be along vocational lines, which will best prepare them. Some of the needs of our students tend to be more towards intellectual lines. And overall, and capping both these groups, I think we should provide a need for intellectual study, for just plain intellectual growth, for growth's sake itself. Right?
What do you think the role of the student should be? What do you think the role of the teacher should be? And what, if anything, is preventing that from happening? I'm talking about the ideal situation.
It's hard to get a common denominator on something like that because given any set group of students and a teacher, there are so many variables that come into play that it would depend. In many cases, it's, kind of a strict setup. A real structured system seems to work well. Sometimes you find you can be more liberal, more flexible about it, and that seems to work better. So really, it's so relative that you've got to judge it according to each situation. I run all 5 of my classes are run differently. Some I'm very liberal with, to use, a word meaning a little bit of flexibility, and some I'm rather rigid with, only because I feel the situation, requires it. Because when you're rigid with the kids you should be flexible with, it doesn't work. And when you're flexible with the kid you should be rigid with, that doesn't work. I hope I said that. Yeah, okay.
Okay. The third question is...
Now, did I answer the whole question, Doug?
Well, You answer it the way you want it. And that's
Okay,
important.
right.
That's
Because it was like a 2-point question there, yeah.
what is frustrating you most as a teacher?
What is frustrating? Yeah, I think the lack of freedom to do in the classroom what some projects and ideas and discussions, etc., and projects that I would like to do. I don't like the marking system such as it is involving numbers. I don't like a marking period. I don't like a written test. I don't think that this is any way to really measure a person's intelligence. But unfortunately, it's the only thing we have at this time. And we have to have something to evaluate youngsters by. This we owe to them.
The ideal educational system is one in which everybody can benefit from, including the student, teacher, and those in the community. Given that, what foundation?
A good foundation is a proper attitude towards the whole thing. Once again, you can't find a common denominator. It depends upon the community, economic makeup, for a better term, a socioeconomic makeup of the community, etc. And I think within that you play it by ear, because I could see where one type of a system would work in one area and another in another. I think the important thing here is attitude and understanding. And, this would be the thing to apply to each situation. And applying this, I can't see how you will not come out right.
Do you believe in a tracking system?
Once again, I have to say it's, relative, because there is a definite need, you see, for a tracking system in some situations, and in others, no. I think a tracking system in some cases hampers interplay between students, and one of the important things I've always considered is that students help one another. So does a teacher. They help the teacher. We learn from one another all the time. However, there are certain specific technological subjects where, you just can't do this. It's more important to do the other. So unfortunately, and I say that because I don't like to separate students on basis of intelligence, as we know it to be so far, but rather I would like to have them all grouped, basically, but in some cases it's just impossible.
Do you believe that students come to school with a genuine interest in learning initially? And if not, what can be done to rectify that?
I think a better word, rather than learning, I guess, maybe motivation is the idea. And I can answer that very briefly by saying that in most cases, when the student hasn't learned, I feel the teacher hasn't taught. I don't know if you want to lose tape on it. Okay. That's what it is. Yeah, right. I feel the best evaluation system that could be used in my years of experience would be to assign a student a project, that relates to the particular subject that they are taking. After all, to memorize things by rote won't really serve you. There are manuals on the outside which you use. You don't have to memorize things in an engineering office, etc. Rather, you must complete a project. And I feel when a youngster completes a project, to me, this is learning. This is the best way I have of evaluating the student. The most important thing to me as an educator, of course, is the students I'm dealing with. I think the school is, made, built, and created for them. They would come first. Secondly, I would have to say their relations to their community would be the second most important thing. And third, to be a little bit practical and pragmatic about this thing, you must have the physical plan, the materials to work with. But I do think the others come first, in that order: students, community, and materials.
Just to clarify one thing, do you think there is a relationship between the students in the school and the community? Not just a pure reactionary type of thing, that they react off what we do here, but is there a relationship?
Oh, I think there's always a relationship. I think the attitudes of the student are always indicative of the family, the community, etc., that they represent. It's always cause and effect.
But is the community showing an interest in the school?
Yeah, I really think there's a sincere effort on the part of most over 30 group, if you will, now is to really genuinely understand, what's bugging the student, the under 30 person of today. But it's something new we've never confronted before, and we're writing the whole book over again. And we blunder through this thing. Many times we try, we think we've got it, and we don't, and we're still trying. As I say, we're writing the book. It's a lot of fun. It's causing a lot of heartaches. But, I really think there's a sincerity involved. And it's just unfortunate sometimes where the sincerity doesn't show through. Rather, you may come off looking very, very bad, and all the while you tried so hard to help the student. But then again, I think the one overlying rule here should be on the part of the teachers that not to be popular about it, but rather to do what's right for the student as the teacher sees fit. My one message is that we must trust one another. I could probably sum the whole thing up in just that one word: trust. Trust and perhaps, okay, I'll take another word. Trust and faith in one another that we do understand and we are trying. Because no one's cursing the darkness. We should not. When a problem arises, we should take this as an opportunity to try to solve it and possibly come out of this thing seeking and finding a higher value than what we had before we started. Very difficult for a teacher, an administrator, and I hope you don't lump these two groups together, by the way. I become quite hurt when students tend to think of administrators and teachers as a great monolith above them. It's not that way at all. I think in terms of a triangle, the student at one apex, the teacher at the other, and finally the administration at the third. But this whole idea of freedom, you see, it's nice to have an idea, and that's great. But now to make it work is a whole other philosophy. Now, the student has the privilege of having the freedom of an idea. But then, of course, on the part of the teacher comes the responsibility of putting it into practice. And we do not have this freedom, of course, that I think sometimes that many students think we have. There are things such as, a silly little thing like attendance, yet legally and to a certain extent morally, we are responsible. I have children in school, and I want to know when they're not in school and where they are. And by golly, when I don't report a student out of class, I feel, some guilt about it because I feel I owe him and his family an obligation. But more about this idea of freedom. Look, Rome wasn't built in a day. I think everyone is beginning to get on the right track. And by that track, I'm talking about seeking higher values. I mentioned that before. But, a person don't become ill in one day. It's a series of events, a whole episode whereby they finally reach becoming ill. So therefore, to cure this illness or to make this change, you've got to go back up those steps and retrace those steps. See? So it's like the car, it finally collapses on you one day on the parkway. Well, it took 7 years for the bad trouble to work in. It may take 7 years to reverse the process. So I say this, if I can leave a little bit of a message, to be patient. And gee whiz, I hate to, but it's part of growing up, and for better, it's part of maturing. You've got to be patient. Things all come to the man that waits, and not that you should just wait. You should also do. But don't be too impatient, because I think then you'll have the tail wagging the dog. You'll destroy all the good you want because you'll make the impatience part of it frustrate you.
I can get specific, but I don't know what I'm going to be. I guess you're really not interested in any one aspect. Any aspect that I'm interested in answering. All right. Okay. Let me answer it in this way. My son will come home. My son, who's a senior in high school, will come home and complain about his high school. And I hear the same complaints about students who go to this high school. Although I would consider that the high school that he attends is more conservative than this school. I get the feeling that the same kinds of things are prevalent in a good many of our high schools, public high schools.
So that what I say about North High School might also be true of many other high schools. I think that there are good things and bad things about North High School. I think that one of the good things, and this may really sound strange to you, but having other schools to compare it with, for example, the school at my center, I think that kids here really have a lot more freedom than they do in some schools. I know that last year, I think it was, the kids in my son's school were still, the seniors were still trying to get permission to go out for lunch. They were still, and still are, being required to stay in the cafeteria the entire lunch period. And all they wanted was the seniors go out. So that I would say this is a plus for North High School. There's more freedom. As much as the kids in this school complain about freedom, there's more freedom here than in some other schools, some other high schools. I'm trying to think of something important now. And when I talk about things that are important that's wrong with North High School, I really don't want to talk about things like maintenance, the plant facilities, although I think that certain facilities that we lack are important disadvantages. For example, and I'm sure that most people around here would agree with me, I think that's a disadvantage not to have an auditorium. It's a disadvantage not to have more types of audio-visual. But these were all things that were included in the budget that we had defeated. Yeah. I think these plant-type inconveniences are among some of the greatest deficiencies of North High School. The relative freedom, I would say, would be the biggest thing I can think of on the plus side. But from the wording of your question, I would say that you're more interested in the deficiencies rather than the pluses.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. But I would say that the plant facilities would be one of the biggest deficiencies of North High School.
Okay. That's good. Walter, you know what I said?
No.
Okay.
Yes. I think there are disadvantages of the tracking system, social reasons. But I think that these are outweighed by the benefits of grouping. I would find it very difficult to work with very slow learners and very advanced students in the same class, try to impart the same type of knowledge to both students at the same time. And this, to me, is the reason for tracking, so that you can work at the level of the students and gear your progress or your manipulation of and your presentation of material to the ability of the students in the class. I feel this is with all the other deficiencies.
I feel education is something to provide the individual with preparation to make society a better place in which to live, make the world a better place in which to live.
Okay, that's it? Okay, let's get to now we got more specific ones. What do you think the role of the student should be in the school? What do you think the role of the teacher should be? Now we're talking about something, the ideal state. And what, if anything, is preventing this ideal state, from occurring here? If you assume that it hasn't occurred yet,
It's redundant for me to say this, but the role of the student is to be a student, and the role of the teacher is to be the teacher, and it doesn't seem to be turning out that way lately. I think one of the ideas that has permeated the schools lately is the fact that we're all on the same level, and maybe we are as persons, as people, but this is a different relationship, the student-teacher relationship. It shouldn't be on the same level, ideally. Of course, this is my opinion. And the trying to make it an even situation between teacher and student doesn't accomplish the whole idea of education. So the role of the student is as a student, the role of the teacher as a teacher.
Okay. The third question I have is, what frustrates you most as a teacher?
Almost everything. Well, right now, I guess there have been many frustrations, but right now it's attitude, student attitude. And I can understand why students feel the way they do. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on students nowadays that wasn't there so much when I was a high school student. And I can understand why students feel the way they do, this feeling of indifference. So this is a frustration as far as I'm concerned, because many students come into the class and care less really about what goes on. Many of them come in because they have to, and they want their requirements to be fulfilled, and they need so many units of science, and they really don't care about biology, and they really don't care about what's going on in the class. They just show up. And this is frustrating, because no matter what you do or try to do, it doesn't bring any sort of positive response. And I feel if I'm doing as much as I can to create some sort of motivation, some sort of atmosphere, and there's no response to it, this is a tremendous source of frustration to me. And it's been getting worse each year.
Okay. The ideal educational system is one in which everyone will benefit from, including the student, teacher, and those in the community. Now, assuming we haven't laid the proper foundation for an ideal educational system, or better yet, if you could, what type of foundation would you like to see established so that we could reach that goal of the ideal educational system? Maybe the one that you were explaining in the second question, the role of the student and teacher.
Well, before I answer that, I just want to add something to the previous question. I stated in the beginning of my answer that there were many frustrations in teaching. There are many rewards, too. And so, I don't want to make it sound like a negative answer. Whether you realize this or not, there are many joys in teaching, along with the frustrations. I guess this is true of all things in life, too. You probably find that any sort of endeavor, you'll find that there are things about it you don't like, things about it that frustrate you, things about it that don't agree with you. But on the other hand, if you get more pleasure than frustration out of your task, then it's all worthwhile. But to answer this question now about the ideal foundation for a school system, I don't know. I guess we're dealing in generalities, and I don't know if we can really ever hope to attain a system like that, because we're beings that, because of our nature, are subject to mistakes and feelings. In other words, we are variable factors. All of us are. And to try and come together and agree on one correct system, one ideal system, is really an impossibility. I could think of my own. What you're really asking is what's my opinion of an ideal school system. I don't know if you want specifics or
Anyway, you want to get
well, I would think it's a school system in which the students are active in, well, physical as well as mental activities in the school, that the teachers are active and motivated by their job, that the administrators are also active, motivated, and not held back by pressures, social pressures, economic pressures, and the like. And that the community is also involved. A community in which pressure to get your son in or daughter into a specific school is the ultimate goal, and not really the education of the child, but the status. Looking for the status. If we can get parents, the community, involved in education rather than the benefits of it, then I think we have a good system. Now, how this would be attained is another matter. I don't know if we could ever attain it.
No, I'm not asking yet. It's almost an impossible question to answer. Okay. Do you believe there should be a tracking system?
Yes and no. How's that for? I would say definitely yes in some classes, some courses. I still can't reconcile the fact that there shouldn't be a tracking system in, let's say, a science course. Not being prejudiced now because I'm a science teacher, but I couldn't see this in math either. I think you have to make some distinction in these courses, maybe some other courses, but right now I'm thinking in terms of math and science, where you just couldn't get 100% learning achieved. By 100%, I mean all students in the class achieving a certain level of knowledge at the end of the term by having different tracks. And the reason why I feel this way is because these subjects require a certain amount of aptitude. Just the subject of its nature requires certain aptitude, a beginning base, if you wish, in each individual. And if we tend to just throw anyone in with all varying aptitudes, you might, well, first of all, how are you going to structure the course as a teacher? Might you structure the course towards the average? In which case it might still be too hard for the lower student and maybe too boring for the advanced student. And of course, if you go to either extreme, you'll be wiping out the other segment of the class population. So with regard to science and math courses, I would say, yes, tracking is a necessity. With regard to some of the liberal arts courses like English, social studies, art, music, I think these are courses in which tracking isn't important. I think, in fact, it's probably even healthy to have a wide range of opinions. In other words, these are courses that, or rather, in which opinions can be expressed. And if you want to get a complete spectrum of opinion, you want to include that spectrum in the aptitudes of the students taking the course. So in courses like that, I would feel that tracking might even be detrimental to the ultimate outcomes of the course.
Do you believe that students come to this school with a genuine interest in learning? And if not, what do you think could be done to rectify something like that?
Well, that's kind of hard to say because I don't deal that much with the 7th graders, with the 8th graders, with the lower groups. By the time I get the students, they've already formed their opinions about the school and about learning and whatnot. But from what I can see, the 7th graders are an eager group. They seem to have all kinds of desires to learn. They seem very enthusiastic about school. I see these little kids running around and poking their noses into everything, which is good. They're interested. So from what I can tell, it seems that they're encouraged by a new environment. They're curious to find out what goes on, and they want to become a part of it, and so on. I don't think there's any lack of interest or indifference that I've noticed.
Well, what do you think happens between that time and the time you did that?
Well, I think it's the pressure again that builds up. I have my own ideas about why seniors get senioritis, and it has something to do with this whole idea of pressure. We can look back through even just the past few years, look at the curricula that have been written, the new curricula that have been written, and see that everything's been upgraded. Not that this in itself is bad, but it seems that we're, just trying to force feed, just trying to push and push and push and get as much crammed into their little skulls as possible. And after so many years of doing this, you just want enough of it, And this is why we see fewer students after school, for example. It used to be years ago where kids would come after school and stay for hours and hours trying to do experiments and whatnot. Nowadays, it's very hard to get students to come after school. They've been pressured all day long, and they just want to get out of the situation. And I think this starts in, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th, 10th, 11th, and then 12th grade, after college admissions notices have been sent out, the pressure's off. They've reached their goal, if that was their goal. And now we don't have to worry about school anymore. Okay. So I guess it's something to do with our society. It's not really something of a specific nature in the school itself. It's something that society has brought on all of us, on all schools. And we're just responding. Now, I'll give you an example. I find that results on Regents tests are getting, maybe I shouldn't say this on a recording. Of course, it may be held against me. I don't know, but I find, anyway, this is personal. Again, this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying that this is true, but this is what I feel is true. Results are getting poorer and poorer with each year. And I try and find out why. It turns out, at least in my way of thinking, that students are being pressured so much that at the end they really could care less what happens. The Regents test really doesn't matter too much, they find out, because it only means the loss of a Regents scholarship maybe, or going to a state school. And anyway, I'm going to the University of Miami, so I don't have to worry about the New York State Regents. And even though the intent is not to teach for that one test, not to teach for the Regents, there is a certain underlying feeling that you get as a teacher that these Regents marks and the percentages of students passing the Regents and whatnot are at least looked at by the administration. There's a standing joke, or at least there was up to a couple of years ago. One science teacher, whose name will remain unmentioned, would mark his Regents test, and the following day, first question he would be asked as he walked in the door, and he was asked this question by a prominent administrator in the school, was, what percentage passed? In other words, what was your percentage? Regents test. And this was true every year. This teacher was asked, following the Regents test, what was your percentage? And of course, we're told at meetings or whatnot, we don't look at it. You don't have to worry about that. But everybody knows that sort of underneath there somewhere, they look at it.
So you're talking about pressure on teachers.
Well, it's not so much a pressure. I mean, it doesn't matter to me whether I teach for a Regents test or for another particular purpose. I can adjust myself to teach biology for whatever purpose they want me to teach it. Let's say. Ideally, the purpose of it is to teach biology for the sake of learning about living things. But that somehow has been scrambled up in the process, and now, instead of teaching biology so kids can learn about life and about their environment, things around and whatnot, it's to get a certain percentage through the New York State Regents. And it doesn't matter if they really learned about it, because after all, nobody's going to find out anyway. At least, not to any great extent. And what people do find out are the numbers. That's something concrete. Knowledge isn't. You know what I mean? In other words, the amount of knowledge that you take with you out of this school when you graduate is something that really is intangible. Okay? But a number on a report card is tangible. You know what I mean? So when people judge you, they judge you on your tangible assets. Everyone does this. I mean, this is human nature, right? You're going to judge someone on something tangible. We're translating an intangible into a tangible number, right? And that's what we're using as our basis of judgment. He knows this much number. You see? I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you did a good job there. Let me see. Let's go right into this one. What is your evaluation system you use for your students? And what evaluation system would you prefer to use if all these outside forces were around?
Well, that's easy. I can answer the two parts of that question with one answer. Well, the second part of the question I'll answer is the system I would like to use is the system I'm using now. In other words, I'm happy with the evaluation that I have. The system I use is based on, many factors. Again, we're translating some intangible things into something tangible. Well, this is the system. This is the way we have to operate because we're told to operate that way. But to give you an idea, I check students during the labs. I watch them. And they know I'm watching. It's not like a big brother thing either. I just want to find those kids who have the technique. Like you can tell if a kid has a certain aptitude, skill, by observing them. So I do this during labs. That's one intangible judgment that I make. Reaction in class. You always get the student who sits there half awake. And of course you get the other side, you get the student who's always active. This is another intangible. You try and get attitudes, at least I do. Try and deduce from talking with the students on a personal level and whatnot, their attitude towards the class, towards the labs, towards that particular assignment, and stuff like that. And, judge from that, make another judgment. And of course you have your tangibles, your tests, quizzes, lab questions that have to be answered. And hopefully I put them all together into one number that is a judgment what that student is. Now, you can't make a judgment of a student unless you compare him with someone else. In other words, I think all types of marking systems are really nothing but comparisons. You're comparing one with another. I try and be as objective as I can. Now, I have a lot of kids that I like a lot of kids that I might not like so much, and I try and treat the two equally. Consciously, I try to anyway. Might not work out subconsciously, but I feel that to really be fair, you have to try and be as objective as possible. And this is something that's up to an individual. This is something that is hard to judge. Like if someone were to judge me on my judgment, it would be very hard for them to judge if I was objective or not. See? And I don't think you can just take a quiz mark or a test mark and say that's going to be the mark. There have to be other factors involved. This is where your own subjective judgment comes into making up an objective judgment of the student. See?
Let me stop it for this one. 3 things that are most important to you as a teacher.
Well, I just said I can only think of one, and that's freedom. And that would, I would think, encompass more than 3 important things, you know. And by freedom, I mean freedom to do things the way I want to do them, the way I feel the students would get the most out of the course. Now, of course, there are certain, I guess, certain pitfalls in being too free. Can you have freedom without some sort of system of checking? I don't know. You see, what I'm thinking of is an ideal. I would like to be completely free to do what I can with my students. Without, you know, if I want to give marks, that's up to me, so on. In other words, I didn't have to be structured. But I don't know if I were an administrator, if I would approve of such a system. You know, it might sound like a contradiction, but you can get freedom to a point where it's abused, and then it's not worth it. You know, it's not of any value then when it's abused. So, just again answering personally, I would like freedom for myself to do what I think is best for the students.
Okay, now, you said you would like. Could you clarify one point there? Do you feel you have that freedom that you're talking about? Or do you believe you don't have it? Do you believe you have some of it, but then there's some of these other forces that come in that take away those other types of freedom you're talking about?
Well, I don't think anyone in the schools, anyone in this world for that matter, has the freedom they want. I'm very satisfied here. Otherwise I wouldn't have stayed this long. So I think I'm fortunate that I have more freedoms than teachers in other schools, and I've spoken with many teachers and find that in a lot of cases things are very repressive for them. As far as I'm concerned here, I've been treated very well. Well, sometimes I complain about it. The administration has been good to me. My chairman has been good to me, and meaning that they've been good as far as freedoms are concerned. I think they have faith in me and the job I do, and if this is something that I can instill even further, I can foresee maybe even greater freedoms. So I don't have all the freedom I want. Maybe this is good, because maybe I might not be able to handle it if I had complete freedom, see? And there are some things that are restrictive. Some of these are necessary from the administration's point of view, not necessarily my point of view, though. Of course, I'm looking at it from my side of the fence. I guess if I were an administrator, I'd see it from their side of the fence, too. So there are some things I would like more of, things I'd like to do, so on, but just can't because of time or money or other restrictive factors. But on the whole, I feel I'm quite free and very satisfied.
Because that's a very broad statement. You've probably heard that answer too. My philosophy is that we're here to help youngsters do better what they normally would have done anyway. We have to look at each child as an individual, and we try to make sure that we do that. Sometimes it doesn't quite work out that way, and sometimes there are other factors that come into the picture that would change this. Decisions are always based on, number one, what's the best thing for the kids. We always make them that way. Sometimes there are other factors, teacher factors, money factors, and so on and so forth. I try to look at education broadly. I try to make sure that everyone is heard. I'm a firm believer in participation by groups, by people, in education as in any other business. I don't have all the answers and never expect that I do, but I do feel that if you put enough people together and you work on the problem hard enough and long enough, you'll come up with an answer. The answer may not be the answer that everyone in the group wants, but you'll make some progress. I believe in change. We've always believed in change. Even before we had the last 3 or 4 years where we've had more dramatic change, we still believed in change. We've never been standing still. I firmly believe that you, as a principal, give time to the job, which you never even consider as time. I mean, it doesn't come into the picture at all. You do the job because you love your job, and you're willing to give that kind of thing to the job. And this also should permeate the whole school situation if you can do it. Now, there are various factors coming in today that sort of combat that, because you have situations where people are only willing to work a certain number of hours. There's a difference in the amount of dedication that comes into the picture these days than we had years ago. Years ago, teachers did give more time. They didn't really want to get paid every time they turned around and so forth. Maybe it's not, that's maybe an extreme still. But I'm a firm believer in the fact that the days are long. This is the kind of job you got into in the first place. But if you like it, it doesn't bother you that much. What else about philosophy? I like to work with people. I'm not working with the mechanics of the things. This is not my fault at all. I try to get a good staff and to have their expertise used. You have various people on your staff who do various things well, and every principal's job should be to make sure that these people give this kind of effort to the school district. Sometimes it gets lost, and sometimes people feel they're not recognized, and sometimes we don't even know about it. But when you do the hiring, you try to see what things that people have that will really add something to your school district. We hired a man in music this year, Mr. Shine. He's a guitarist who likes that. He's also a very well-rounded individual, which is what we were looking for in the music area. So now we have a guitar club. And now the kids are interested in junior high school course, when before they weren't. You look for certain kinds of personalities also that you need on your staff. And you build with experience, you build with philosophies. You also want to make sure that you don't always hire the same types. If you hire the same type, before you know it, you're not going to have any excitement coming out of the staff. So that you do try to balance that and weigh it one way or the other. And when you have interviews, you try to see what kind of a personality does this person have. Because let's face it, in good teaching, it's the personality that's coming through just as much as the subject matter. You can have a person with wonderful subject matter background, but if he doesn't relate to the youngsters, and his personalities are such as the blockers there, nothing's going to happen. The kids are going to turn him off. And this happens every so often. I believe firmly in giving a person a job to do and letting him do it. I work this way with the other people on the staff, with the department chairman, with my assistants. I'm not constantly looking over their shoulders. This is the worst thing as far as I'm concerned. So Mr. Ferguson, okay, that's your job, and you do it. Granted, he keeps me informed, and we communicate and everything else. And if he does something that I don't particularly like, okay, I'll tell him about it, and we'll have a discussion about it. By the same token, he should be able to make decisions. That's part of his job, and he should be able to use common sense and good judgment in making these decisions. He should be able to get right answers, otherwise he shouldn't be in the job. And I don't always know the right answers either on this one, because sometimes his answer may be different from mine. And sometimes I'll say, all right, maybe he's right. Let him do it. We do the same thing working with kids. We can predict in some cases what's going to happen. But sometimes people need to perhaps stumble and fumble and make mistakes. That's learning. They don't make the same mistake twice. Same thing with people. People are going to make mistakes. And it's perfectly all right. They're entitled to make mistakes. That's why they're kids in many cases in school. But by the same token, you don't expect that they're going to continue to make the same mistake. I guess that pretty well puts the whole thing together as far as I'm concerned. And if someone asked me to write a paper, I'm sure I could write a lot.
No, that's fine.
This is
well
off the top of the head.
Can I just ask you if I can close that door?
Sure, you get noise.
Okay. Go on.
What's the next question?
Next question is, what do you think the role of the teacher should be, and what do you think the role of the student should be in the school?
Well, number one, the teacher's the expert. The teacher needs a certain amount of training. But a teacher should be able to make decisions within a certain category. They should be able to know what decisions they can make and what decisions they should miss. I think they should have the freedom to operate, but by the same token, they operate within the policies as established, because either you change the policy. I feel if there is a policy, you should work within the policy until it's changed. If you disagree with it, okay. Work like mad to change it. But in the meantime, let's not everybody go in 12 different directions. And that's about the only limitation. I never interfere with marks. I think that's definitely the realm of the teacher. If everybody wants me to give marks, I absolutely say no. You give the marks, I do not. Because I'm not in the class from other marks. So this is all within this whole freedom. Teachers, of course, should be well trained. Teachers should love kids. And the kids should feel that the teachers care. Now, these are qualities sometimes that you really can't spot in anyone. It's not that easy. You only learn this after you've been in the business for a while. Random interviews, you ask certain key questions, hoping that you'll get what the responses are going to be. Bring out what the personality is. Repeat the question for me again.
Okay, what do you think the role of the teacher should be, and what would you
The teacher, in addition to being the expert in the classroom, to participate in the committees that are in the school and helping us to formulate policy. Teachers really should be interested in the extracurricular program. Their role really should not be limited to just what goes on in the four walls of their classroom. They're interested also, not just specifically in that classroom. They should be interested in what is going on in the halls, what the kids are talking about, what the kids are thinking about. And if I'm teaching French, it goes long and far beyond just the fact that I teach French. The teachers should devote their time to their teaching. I know they don't particularly like to do the extra duties. And they have a good point. It would be much better for them to be able to do something else rather than sit on the floor to do it, or whatever it happens to be. Legally, we need a certain amount of coverage, okay. But beyond that, I would like to see them getting involved in special projects. I don't think that the teacher's whole job is coming to North High School and teaching 5 classes. This is pretty well, in some cases, what the teachers seem to be negotiating for. That role can be sold at any place along the line. This is not really, because it means that what are you working 45 hours now? You have 3.5 hours a day? What are you going to do with the rest of the time? And the rest of the time should be working with kids, working to improve yourself, working with curriculum, and taking an interest in the whole and the total school program. I don't think there necessarily needs to be an over-dedication to it, but there has to be a certain.
And the role of the student should be?
The role of the student. I believe in student involvement. I believe that youngsters, that's what we're here for, and they should have some say about what we're here for. I do think that they should go through channels for improvement. I don't think that you should be burning down buildings in order to make a point. The building is a valuable thing, and it's property, and you get all this kind of thing that you're never going to get it back if you lose it. So I don't believe in the radical side of this. We believe in involvement. We work with the students. Students learn from this involvement, and they're entitled to learn from this involvement. I'm sure you yourself learned a lot last year when we were talking about this evaluation of teachers and so forth, and the processes. And you have to realize that you're working with people and with human beings. And what will work with some will not work with another. The kid's role in the school is a participating role in the school. But they have to know at what level certain decisions are going to be made. They have a certain decision-making level at their level. Certain things they can decide at their level. And then there are certain things that I can decide at my level. And there are certain things that the Board of Education decides. And they have to understand this process. Now, I'm sure they feel that this is a very slow process. Many students are very impatient. But in most cases, it's going to be worth their while to work through the stages. Because in the end, if we all work together, we're all on the same team. We're not fighting each other. We all have an understanding of the problem, and we make change. And change has come, and it's going to come. And we are not only listening to the youngsters, we're reacting. And there's a difference. Because I think we have reacted, and we've reacted in a very positive way. But by the same token, if we have felt that it's the wrong thing to do, we've said it's the wrong thing. We haven't panicked, but we do want the youngsters. I would say that this is a very broad statement. I probably wouldn't make a major decision today without discussing with some of the youngsters, which was quite a change from 5 years ago. So people should be aware of this kind of thing. I may still come up with the same answer, but at least that you and others of you are entitled to hear me and listen and give me some answer. Because I've never felt that I am the sole person and I am the power. This is not the thing as far as I'm concerned. I've never operated that way. I always used to operate with the department chairman, with the people in this building with the expertise. And we never operated too much with the youngsters. And now we've added another piece to the whole, operating pretty well the same way. Decision-making has been a common goal. We had an advantage, though, in this building, and that is that I knew all the people that I selected as department chairman And I knew all the teachers when we started here because I was in right from the word go. And we all had common goals and we all worked together. And we had a wonderful start together. So that we had a very, very good relationship that was built in right from the word go. Now, of course, we've added people to the staff and there's been some changes along the way. But this has basically been our philosophy when we started. That we were all going to work together to make North High School the best thing that ever came down the pike. And if they can still feel this, some people get frustrated because they like to do things. Money, when you ask me, that's another question back to you. Well, what's my biggest frustration?
Who can answer that one right now?
It's the fact that, you know, if we had funds, we'd know how to use them without any question. But we have more things that have to be postponed and delayed because we know that we have X amount of dollars that we're living in an average middle-class community that has to meet bills, and we in our own thinking have to be reasonable what we're going to ask these people. And the fact that other schools around us have other things, it bugs me when I go to other schools. No question about that at all. But I have to live within the limitations. Otherwise, you know, that's the well-adjusted individual. He has to understand he has to live within certain limitations in society. If not, then he becomes quite not adjusted. You get an ulcer and you get a lot of other things. So I would say that's probably, we just finished working on budget, not even finished, just started this morning. This is the biggest frustration, where people are asking for things which you know, Lorna, would be nice for them to have. But then you have to sit back and say, well, all right, this year we'll get this, next year we'll get this, next year we'll get this kind of thing. So you're 3 years away, and it's very difficult for me to get the department to accept the fact that he's going to have to wait 3 years before his next. No one likes that kind of thing any more than I do, but it's very frustrating because we go through this. That's, I guess, as far as I'm concerned, my biggest frustration. I haven't been frustrated about working with kids. I haven't been frustrated about working with the teachers because this is the way we've always done as far as the teachers are concerned. So this kind of frustration is all part of the job.
Let's come to another question.
Okay.
Here. Do you feel students come to school with a genuine interest in learning? And if not, I'm not trying to bait the question here, but what can be done to rectify that?
Well, then you're assuming.
Right.
There's an assumption.
I'd rather you dispute it then.
Yeah, I'm not sure, really. You hear this from both sides. There are kids in the school who are happy with the school. They come here, they enjoy it very much, and the 6 years they spend here is the best part of their life. And they go on to college and 4 more good years. And yet, there are other nurses who are disappointed, who are. I would say in the last few years, for some reason or other, maybe this is something we ought to probe sometime, we are getting more unhappiness. Now, maybe the society in general is getting more unhappy people, and we're just feeling our share of it. I'm not sure about this one at all. And I don't think we're any different than anybody else, but when we get a social upheaval, we also get it at school. And we get people who are disappointed. We get people who don't really know. Because there are outside elements that are conditioning the thinking of a lot of people, which makes them not only unhappy because of the war or other things, but then they suddenly also become unhappy in school. And I wish we would have more positive things rather than negative things. Even if we said things in a positive way, I think we'd be better off rather than always the negative. No one emphasizes the positive at all, and you get this in some of your teaching. I would say that last year, and I'm only guessing, and in your American history course, there's a very negative approach. Most of the people were picking things apart. What's wrong with the country? Without even examining the fact that there are some good things that we still have in the United States. They assume that, these are God-given rights. They have these. But the negative is very predominant. Granted, this is always true when you have the kind of change that we have. So I don't know which is coming first, the chicken or the egg, or whether we have done things in school that make the kids unhappy, or whether they're unhappy because of outside influences. And maybe it's a combination of two things. And I'm not sure, Doug, on this one at all. Because no one has this answer, I don't think. If they do, I would like to know it. But we do have more young students who seem to be unhappy, who call school a waste of time, and that bothers me. I try to find out why they think it is a waste of time. Sometimes you get answers, and sometimes the people who say this really, if you're probing enough, don't know why they feel the way they feel. I think all part of this drug culture that we've gotten involved in is also indicative of the fact that we have unhappy people. In some cases, maladjusted people. We've always had some maladjusted people. No question. Of every 1,000, the percentage is always moving. But we seem to be getting a little more. I don't think we're necessarily a sick society. I would not say that. Although I guess the more sickness seems to be coming out than we used to have. We need to do something.
Let's see. The ideal educational system is one that every person, including the student, the teacher, and even those in the community would benefit from. Again, I'm assuming that, as you said just now, we're not laying a proper foundation to bringing all three groups together. Or, let's see, that's a fair way of putting it. No, I put it this way. What kind of foundation would you like to see put in so that we could again reach your vision of the ideal educational system?
Well, you see, I don't know. See, my idea is also what the ideal educational system. If you asked me that 5 years ago, I would give you a pretty easy answer. But I'm not sure anymore it's easy. I have to keep an open mind because we are going in the direction of more responsibility placed on the student. We are going in the direction of more responsibility placed on the teacher. There's also more accountability on the part of the teacher. The two things have to go together. As they become more responsible, they also have to be more accountable. Because we in the administration used to take all the phone calls and all the bumps and all the harassment, and we talked to the teacher about it, and we protected the teacher. But the teacher wants this kind of freedom. The teacher got to be ready also to say, well, I did this because, and I'm ready to stand up and say why. So they have to choose this. The ideal, boy, that's not going to be easy. Ideally, if we had all the people who need to be working together, and I'm talking about the parents and the PTAs and the students and the faculties, and they had common goals. I guess that would be sort of the ideal situation. But right now they don't have common goals. You get them all working together, but then you have your parents' viewpoint, in some cases, disagrees with the students' viewpoint. The youngsters' viewpoint disagrees with the parents' viewpoint. Each one's taking a pretty firm position, and eventually we're all going to get together. But it's going to take a while before this happens.
I've asked this question to a number of other teachers, and that is, do you feel that the parents in the community are really interested in the school? There are some, but do you feel, on the whole, that there is a great deal of interest in what's going on outside of the regular people that show up at the PTA and people that, are directly involved with the mechanics of the school?
Well, you see, Doug, you may have a lot of interest, but not necessarily expressed interest. After all, most of the conversation at the dinner table, I would say in most homes, is about school. So the parents, in general, I would say, are interested. It doesn't mean, however, they're going to come out and go to a meeting, which is important. You see, they don't express their feelings or their ideas, but they are interested. Because just the fact that they're talking about it and they want to know what's going on in school is very definite interest. Now, I'm sure you'll find some families that it's not the conversation at dinner time, and it's not the conversation at all in the school, or in the school or in the home. But those are not, I don't think, our community. Really, we have some. Every community will. But I would say, in general, that the parents here are interested parents, and this is reflected in the fact that they're interested in having their kids get further education. They find the money to do it. When 80% of the kids are going on for further education, there has to be some kind of interest in the community in order to make this happen, even if two people have to go out and go to work. But some people feel that the people run the school and I'll run my home. Then they don't want to be involved in the school program. As long as they're fairly well satisfied with what's going on, they'll let professionals handle the professional job. But they are very interested. Really. Because they have sent their kids on, and they've scraped, and they've done a lot of things to make sure that their kids get. See, we have the thing in our community, and that is most of the people moved here with one purpose in mind. They came out of the city, and they wanted to make sure their kids got a good education. That was their number, in some cases, their number one premise. That's why they moved out here in the first place. So I do think we have interest, but it is not necessarily expressed by these people at all. And therefore we say, well, the parents are apathetic. I don't necessarily agree with that at all. They may be apathetic to some of the things that we're trying to do, and we don't get them out. But some people really hate meetings, and they don't want to go to meetings, and yet they'll support the budget. For good education. So I don't think they have a tension at all where people are against the school. This I have in the sense, I could be completely wrong, but I don't find this to be true at all. You know, the percentage of complaints that we get are very minimal in the culture. You're always going to get some, but it's not a situation where the people are rising up and saying, you know, that school is so-and-so and so. We don't get that kind of thing. And we've worked hard in trying to have a good education system here, too. And the people, I think we've built a reputation. And they respect our opinions about it. If you had a bad reputation, you're in a different ballgame. But I think we have a pretty good reputation. We have a good reputation in colleges. And yet, see, then we go to the other side. What do we do with the other 20%? The youngsters who are not drinking. Now, this we have been lacking. I'd be the first to admit it. It is important because we do have the BOCES program, where the youngsters are getting much better education because they can select 40 different things that they can choose from as to what they want to do. And these kids need their place in the sun. They're entitled to it just the same as everybody else. They need to be felt that they are good, solid citizens. I think in some cases the kids in the school feel that they're looked down upon. And how we ever change that, Doug, I don't know. That's a problem that we haven't even discussed along the way here, but it does exist. And when you talk to kids who are not college bound, they feel they're low on this totem pole. Nobody's going to listen to me. Why should I express my opinion anyway? Because some fellow who's much brighter than I am and is very glib, do the talk, he's going to do it that way. I really can't handle him at all, and I know I can't handle him, and yet we don't have a him like that to speak for us. So it is a problem. And I don't know whether you solve it by not grouping. I think it's a bigger problem. Completely. Because youngsters are inclined to group themselves in. The fact that you gets into our tracking culture. You're going to go to college. Immediately you have grouped yourself with a certain kind of person. And when you get out of college, who are your friends going to be? And who are your associates going to be? They're going to be the people who went to college. And this is the way it breaks. It's very, very seldom that you find a mixture. You probably can look at your parents. Who are the friends of your parents? People they grew up with, who in most cases went the same road as your parents went. And it's very seldom you find a mixture where you have people who are college educated who are mixing with people who are not. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying this is the way it is. So that even if you have mixed kids all over this school, they would be inclined to do religious problem to start with. What Jewish girl is going to date a Gentile boy? Let's face it. So how are you going to mix them? Or vice versa. I don't care which way you want to say it. So that tends to have the school.
you have a sort of hierarchy built in school on the basis of how well it is done. Now, we've made all the efforts in the world to try to get some of this to mix. I kept talking last year on this whole thing every time we would have a liaison meeting. You know, where are some of the other youngsters we ought to be hearing from? Can't get them. We'd have a few who would come out and then they would lose interest. Or they have pretty well assumed that really, that whatever they say, really nobody's. Okay. When you talk about grouping, we tried an experiment this year in the 7th grade. See whether or not it would work. We're not too sure that it is. Part of our problem, and I'm not being critical of the elementary school, is that the kids have been grouped for 6 years before we ever get them. Now, how do you break that down? It's established. It's there. They, in as far in District 13, are taking the top, the whipped cream, and putting them in a separate building and giving them a separate district program. I don't think they do that anymore. But the kids were already chosen and picked. We had our blue birds and we had our red birds, and then what are we going to do when they get here? The kids know it. And these are really the formidable years. Grouping is done not because of social adjustment, it's done because of academics. If I'm a teacher, sure, we can say to the teacher, good, group within your classroom. Fine. The elementary level, you can do that. You can take a class and divide it into 3 groups. There's no problem. However, at the high school level, if I were to do that, I would have 3 groups in each class, and we would have 5 classes. And that would mean that I would make 15 preparations. Now, you know, and I know that no teacher's going to make 15 preparations. So what happens is that you teach to the middle, and the kids on the top suffer, and the kids at the bottom suffer. And that's the whole basis for grouping that we started. It was to get what we tried to make a teachable unit, so the teacher could teach all of the youngsters in the class. Sure, we could say you'll individualize the instruction, but it doesn't happen. We don't have a one-to-one situation. We don't have teachers who are making 30 different lesson plans for a class of 30 kids. It's just not going to work. We have to be realistic as to what we can expect them to do. And that's why the device was there. Granted that there's some social problems that have come out there, but I think these social problems were there before we ever got the kids. Sure, we may have advanced the situation, but we had always felt also that the kids benefited more from the academic, therefore it was worth it to sacrifice the social situation that we knew was going on. And secondly, the social situation is going to exist regardless of what we do about it, even if we didn't have an improvement. We haven't given up on it. All I'm giving is the philosophy really behind the whole grouping situation, why it was done and why we're trying.
Am I correct in assuming that you are a little bit discontented with the results, as we see it now, but it's better than nothing? Is that what you're saying, that you just can't throw it out? But if you would prefer to see something, at least looking into it a little bit more and seeing if we can improve it, because you don't see that again as being something ideal in itself.
Yes. I don't think you see that ideal, but anything really, Doug, is truly ideal. This is the thing of it, and always things can be improved. I don't think that grouping is ideal. I don't think that not grouping is ideal. I don't know what the common ground is in between the two. In most cases, particularly in the skill subjects, the departments want to group. We spent, at least 7 or 8 meetings last year going over this whole grouping situation. And we started out on the premise, all right, we don't want grouping. We went full circle. We came all the way back to the fact that, I almost had to twist a couple of arms to try and experiment. Because the more they talked with people, and the more they thought about it, the lesser of the evils, we'll put it that way, I guess, is to have the grouping. Because there are too many problems the other way. That academically, we felt that the kids would suffer. Mainly because we're expecting much too much to expect the teacher to have the kind of preparation we were talking about, because they're just not going to do it. It's not realistic to expect them to do it. So that's about where we stand. Now, we're evaluating grouping this year in the 7th grade.
So this is to me.
Okay.
And
Unfortunately, the seventh grade that we had this year, academically, and they told us this before we got them, is not a very strong grade. So the sampling we're using is a poor sampling. But we have a meeting scheduled now for next week sometime to have all the teachers of the seventh grade, Mr. Riley setting up, sit down and do an evaluation of where we stand. You know, we didn't group in every subject. We took the English and we took the social. And we did group in math. And we tried it in science, and I don't know whether it worked out that way at all completely in science, because we had a computer problem on that one. See, what happens is that if you start out, and I think I've told you this before, if a youngster is honors in 3 subjects, or even in 4 subjects, or even in 2 subjects, the chances are that it's going to be difficult to schedule him in other things when it isn't quite that way. Now, you get up to 4 subjects, the 5th subject is going to be an honors program almost automatically. And granted, we do it subject by subject at the high school level, we have a better chance there. But at the junior high school level, all kids take all things. There's no space in their program. There are no study halls that you can play with to move them around. They're all there. So a kid almost falls in a slot, and he goes all the way across the slot, even though you try to break it. So we broke it a bit as much as we possibly could in the scheduling. We had to change it around, fuss with it, play with it to make sure it was going to come out right. But the English people weren't that happy with it, and they were the people who asked for it. And I'm not sure the social studies people are happy with it. And in our school, you have splits in various departments. You've also had a lot of the new teachers, not a lot, some of the new teachers who felt that the answer to all problems was not to have them grouping. And they had never taught any other way but in a grouping situation. They didn't know what it was like to teach without any grouping, and yet they were making a determination. They thought that was going to be better. And I'm not sure that they think now that it is, now that they've had some experience with it. So that their judgment was only a half judgment because they hadn't any experience in it. Within your department, you're very definitely split. Certain departments in the school, some that you would think should say, oh, we don't want any grouping at all. Half that department is saying we do. But certain individuals within it are saying, you can't get unity of opinion about this. They all say, oh, that's a department, let's really do a job. Why do you come? I don't want it. I'm going to get back. And unless, this is another philosophy, unless you can get everybody with the same goals and all working together, it's very, very difficult to make any progress. Because everybody's looking to protect what they thought in the first place. And if they don't make any progress. So you try to capitalize on, everybody gets defensive. And I thought this way, I still feel this way, prove it to me some other way. They don't have common goals at all. All they're trying to do is put the knife in the program. So, okay.
I'd say the 3 things that are most important to you as a principal. You don't have to even know.
Yeah.
Explain each one. Just list them.
Three things in a group. Now, are you talking about educational things? Are you talking about the goals for the school? Are you talking about myself personally?
No, I don't want to talk about yourself personally.
Oh.
Let's talk about the goals of the school and education. And put them together. See if you can list during it. Stop.
Sure that North High School stays with the times. As a matter of fact, it's on what we call the leading edge. It's always been there. We want to make sure it stays there. We want to be innovative. We want to change. We want to have the newest things for the kids. Because who can predict what the world's going to be like 10 years from now? You have to have a good foundation. We're interested in building not only kids who have knowledge, but also good kids. Kids who can think. Kids who can make decisions. Who can exercise good judgment. Many times you have bright people. But the brightest people do not always exercise the best judgment. And judgment is a very hard thing to teach. It's hard to you learn computer math. But there are some people who never will be in a position to learn. how to make the right decision at the right time. And yet we try to give them this kind of experience. That's why I think that pupil involvement is wonderful, because you are getting, at a very early age, long before I ever faced it, experience with exercising. The knowledge is wonderful. But I guess number one in my thinking is to make sure we move ahead. The pace will probably be a little slower than the kids would like us to move, because it does move slowly. But it's no longer taking 25 years as it used to. And this is why some people are so tight, because the change is coming too rapidly. There's a generation who they were almost out of it before they had to worry about it. Now they're in the middle of it. So it's time. I think I want to make sure, secondly, that we hire good people. I'm hopeful that the people who are coming out of the schools today are as well prepared as some of the real old-timers that we have here. And this seems to be a question. We have a lot of dedicated people who went into teaching because they really wanted to get involved with the educational program. But I'm really not sure today whether the people who are coming out of the schools and are going into teaching feel quite the same way about it. I have a feeling that they're looking more that it's a job. I'll work my 8 to 3 or whatever it is, and that's it. That bothers me because schools don't run that way. We need these other things at the end of the school. We need teachers to be interested in them, did. And if they're not, and we want to close the door, then there's going to be a void in here. We used to have a much broader extracurricular program. There are 2 factors. The kids' interest has changed in some cases. And also the fact that the sponsorship has changed. People will do things up to a certain point, but there are always some people on the staff that are very dependable, and I could go to it. It wouldn't matter what I would ask them to do, they'd say fine. But those people are not necessarily the people who are getting out of school and are coming through now. They're also going to be hiring people who have lived with drugs in college for the last 3 or 4 years. That may be good. It's not necessarily going to be bad, because at least they will know, well, I hope, better than we know how to cope with the situation, because frankly, we don't know how to cope with it. I'll be the first to admit it. And we need help in that. Very definitely interested in a total school program. When we first started North High School, we looked at North High School as a community center, and you think, gee, we just thought of this now. And Doug, if you were here 15 or 16 years ago, it was. We had the kids here. We worked with the kids. And of course, we had a built-in wonderful thing. It was new. Everything was the first, and everything was started. And we didn't have any old-hat things at all. So the kids really got involved, because they felt as excited about it as we did. And then now the excitement for some of the kids is quite different. They're not that basically interested in the school. They have other interests. They're interested in politics. That's a new thing, really, relatively. You yourself, for instance, are interested in the broad things in the country, which the kids years ago were not. This is good. This is not good at all. Because, we talk to college and all this other thing, and yet they really haven't gotten to care yet about the local scene around the school. I keep harping on this all the time. We had a man who wrote a letter last night to the Board of Education. There's the beer bottles, and the broken glass, and the wine jugs. Why are the kids out at all hours? My youngster went to school there, he didn't get out, and so on and so forth. I have to go back to the offices in the senior class now. So we better not get too many of these, because Grand Road's going to have some. But we're experimenting with the program. If the neighborhood suddenly starts getting up in arms, then we have a little difficulty. But we're not, we want to open new doors. I try to do as much reading as I have time for. I go to conferences. I think we make every effort, really, to make sure to get you things that you want and we feel you're ahead. Don't stop asking. I think this year is a good year. I think we're talking to each other. We're understanding each other more this year than we understood each other. Last year was a I don't want to go through another last year, but anyway, it was a different year in that too many things came together at the same time. Not only the school, but everything. You know, all the pieces suddenly. That 1 week was a nightmare. And it wasn't just the school; it was everything. It was the whole country felt it. But I do think that we are working very well together. I think there's a better understanding. I think, and this is something that we are going to constantly do work for.
Well, maybe then you can get into the next question here, which is, in concluding the interview, if you can get across one message to everybody, again, interested in this school, what's happening here? What might that message be?
We ought to have is that we all should be able to understand the other party. He's entitled to his viewpoints. Let's not try to shout him down. Let's listen to him. Let's reason with him. We also have the right to argue with people. We have the right to disagree. But let's all accept the fact that this guy doesn't agree. We should be able to express it without a lot of animosity into the whole thing. And let's, if at all possible, have a more happy atmosphere rather than a more negative atmosphere. This is what I think we should try to work for. I can make it busy anymore probably than you do. We're all looking for a happy life. This night, we'll also do all the things that they have a misunderstanding.